It's fine.
Well, that's good.
The Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water and Sewer Commission meeting for November 15th, 2018 will come to order. Commissioner Turnipseed will lead us in the invocation, and I will lead us in the pledge. If you don't mind rising and bowing your heads.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. And Father, as we enter this Thanksgiving season, we're just so thankful that we can live in a free country where we have the right to vote. And we just pray for all of our leaders, Father, both the national leaders and the state leaders and our local leaders. And Father, we thank you for all the employees of the JWSC. We're thankful for what they do and the fact that we're able to serve the citizens of Brunswick and Glynn County. Bless our meeting and just help us to bring glory to you throughout everything we do in our lives. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Any public comment? Okay. First thing we have on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from 1 November.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the minutes from November 1, 2018 regular meeting.
Second?
Second.
Okay.
I was late for the regular meeting and absent of the executive session, so I'm going to abstain from both.
Okay. Lost me. Had my stuff going down. All those in favor of accepting the minutes, please raise your right hand. Minutes carried. 6 approval and 1 abstention. Okay, the executive session minutes.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the minutes from November 1, 2018 executive session.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay. 6 with 1 abstaining. Okay, next thing we have pump station 421 upgrades.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. This is pump station 4021 upgrade. Recommendation staff brings before you. A little bit of background. We talked about this pump station last commission meeting. In the packet attached to the memo, there's a location map. It's 11 by 17, got a lot of color to it. There's a little snippet, Google Street View, that shows you what it looks like. The location, if everybody will recall, is right in front of the Sonic food service establishment. So pump station's been there quite a while, short little force main, less than 50 foot long. So it's a little jumper station, as we refer to them. In the map here, you'll see some green shaded areas. And the green shading shows you what basins or what areas are contributing wastewater flows to this station. In other words, if somebody uses water up in the green shaded area, anywhere it's green shaded, it will eventually flow through 4021. So you can see it's a very large area, highly commercial, good bit of residential mixed up in there as well. I'll walk through the memo a little bit and kind of catch the high points. Right at the top, just a quick overview. What is this? Proposed upgrade of 4021 to accommodate current and future demands. When I say future demands, we've had a lot of interest in this area. So a lot of folks coming in, doing their diligence. We see a few projects on the horizon. Why? It's currently designated over design capacity as well. 2015 master plan update and current calculations. Funding. Proposed funding will come from the capital expansion funds. We currently have a balance of $551,000 in that fund. This project, the fund or the budget that we're asking for is $275,000. 4021 does serve a large area of the Joint Water Sewer Commission North Mainland service system, including several upstream basins. And those basins are just simply other pump stations that pump to this station or to its basin. It currently pumps about 873 gallons a minute. It was designed to be somewhere north of 1,300 gallons a minute. To serve the existing population based on our calculation methods, we need to be around about 3,000 gallons a minute. And projecting out with the methodology we're using now, with about a 1.5% growth per year, taking it out about 10 years, we're looking at somewhere just under 4,000 RUs for a peak condition. So that's what the station needs to be able to do, or at least the staff is recommending this upgrade, bring this station up to. There were, in the past, previously considered upgrades for this station, so it's been on the radar for quite some time. We actually have some plans on file that were done back in 2012, I believe, to simply upgrade the station, and we also have some plans on file to actually relocate the station. So right now, it's literally on the edge of Altama, right in front of those businesses, and we, of course, would like to relocate it. It's fully possible to do that, but there's a large cost associated with that. So the next upgrade beyond this pump upgrade and short little section of force main would be probably a relocation of the station to a different, an adjacent piece of property. Entirely possible to do, it's just the cost of it right now. Upgrading to a triplex, it's currently a duplex. It's rectangular wet well. There's plenty of room in there to do this. It's 10 by 10. So that's the options being presented. And also it's referenced and recommended in the 2015 master plan. They recommended 15 horsepowers and a 16-inch force main. Staff recommendation right now is a little bit different than that. We're increasing to 30 horsepower and going to an 18-inch force main. So, rundown of the currently proposed upgrades. Upgrade, like I said, from 20 to 30 horsepower. The linear feet of force mains around about 45 to 50 feet. We're going from a current 8-inch to 18-inch. Capacity made available for those of immediate need. We do already have a site survey in hand from when we were doing the property transfer, partial resolution cleanups. So we do have it already in hand. And the intent is to design this or create the design plans in-house. Be a pretty simple design set to put together. And the budget we're asking for is for us to put this out for construction bid. So rather than trying to do this in-house, put it out for construction bid. Estimated, and there's also attached on page number 2 of the memo, is a breakdown of the construction estimate, $264,000. Pumping increased to around 4,000 GPM. That equates to about 1,400 REUs made available. And like I mentioned before, we do have several residential as well as hotel interests in this area. If you can imagine, well, you can see by the map the area that is served. So everything basically between Community Boulevard up Altama all the way to Chapel Crossing. So also mentioned the school, Altama Elementary is looking to relocate up Altama north, closer to Chapel Crossing. I think they're looking at some property up there. So they're one of the proposed developments that would be happening that would contribute to this basin. So mostly commercial lots, assuming 2-inch meters for commercial, 14 capital improvement fees needed to recoup investment. Less if there's larger meters or larger requirements put on there, we can recoup our money much faster. So that's just saying how quickly we can recoup this budget through capital improvement fees for new developments. This was part of the proposed 5-year capital improvement plan list that was presented several months ago. We did have a proposed project budget of $200,000 at that time. So it's a little bit more than what we had put in there, but we're looking to upgrade it a little bit more than we were at that time. That's mostly due to recent inquiries that we've had. So leads us to the staff options, or the action options we have here in staff's recommendation. We would recommend to designate these improvements as a capital improvement project with the overall budget $275,000 and approve the upgrade, and that's supposed to be 4021, not 4120, as presented above. So apologize for the typo. And that's where we're at. Happy to answer any questions.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes,
You say the design capacity of the pump station was 1358 gallons a minute, but it's only pumping 873. Why is that?
That is a good question. So the 1358 that we came up with was through modeling. We modeled it with the created the pump definition from the pump curves.
So we're not sure what the original design was, though, then.
Correct.
Okay.
That's a model, yes, sir.
But 873 is a drawdown. Now, but the required to serve the existing connections is 3,000 gallons a minute?
That's the peak required to existing connections.
Okay, peak flow, okay.
Yes, sir.
And we can design it, but we'll have to put it out for construction bids.
That's correct. We certainly have the forces and skills to do it in-house, but in talking with operations, they were fairly excited to hear that we were asking for a budget that would allow us to bid it out for construction.
And with location, this one on the side of a very busy roadway there, it make more sense to let somebody else do with those potential hazards.
Yeah, it's gonna require some bypass pipe, pumping.
Yes, we will be doing the bypass, and we had to bypass this station due to some pump failures
Yeah.
in August and September. So we recently had it bypassed. It's not that difficult to do, so we won't be needing anyone to bypass. We'll bypass it.
If this is voted on today, can we release those areas to start
Excellent.
moving ahead with their plans to?
Excellent question. That's what staff would ask for. As soon as the project is moved into the official capital improvement list and funded, then we would ask of the executive director if we could go ahead and be installing taps in the space.
Okay, did you say there was a change in the recommended motion? There's no change in the recommended
No,
motion?
it was a typo. It says 4120, but the recommended motion is correct. It's 4021 is the pump station.
Oh, okay.
Yes, sir.
I think this is a good project. I think we ought to proceed with it.
Okay.
What do you think the schedule would be like on this project? You, you would do we'd do the engineering in-house, and then we'd go out for a bid, and then we'd expect a schedule back from the contractor. What do you think those components would be in terms of scheduling?
The quote we got for the pumps had about a 12-week lead time to get the 3 pumps here. So that's gonna be, the biggest thing is once we select a contractor is them getting those pumps in here. So probably not too much longer after the pumps get here, because if we're installing 50 feet of force mains, short work. It's more just waiting on the equipment to get here.
So we'd buy the pumps?
So we would buy the pumps instead of the contractor.
Whichever way you want to do it.
Just save on the tax. Ma'am?
You can avoid markup.
And the tax.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay.
I recommend-
Other questions? Go ahead.
I recommend the JWSC Board of Commissioners designate these improvements to Basin 4021 as a capital improvement project with an overall budget of $275,000 and authorize the executive director to implement as described above.
Second.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. Motion is carried 7-0. How much trouble would it be to prepare a number of days Gantt chart to submit with proposals like this?
Certainly, we can certainly do that. Projected schedule, all right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to tie you down to dates, but just how many days you think that it'll be, so that we have some idea of when we'll be complete once we start.
That's definitely fair to ask for. Yes, sir, we can do that.
Okay. All right, we're gonna move on to the next item, which is Tabby Place Infrastructure Easement and Dedication.
That's it. Commissioners, these are hopefully getting to be somewhat routine now that as we bring these before you, but it's easement and infrastructure dedication. So at the end of a private development project, typically there's infrastructure to be dedicated to the Joint Water Sewer Commission. That has to go through official procedure. That's why we're here today, as well as easement dedications. So that's what this is. Tabby Place is a subdivision that was constructed there at the corner of North Harrington and Harrington Lane on St. Simon's Island. The very back page is a vicinity map, if you like, if you're not quite sure where that is. It is a 53-lot subdivision, residential, single-family home. And there was water and sewer infrastructure that was installed to serve that development, as well as some lots that lie outside of that development. So it's essentially a pass-through is a term we use, but we have customers outside of the subdivision, within the subdivision, and then it connects to our existing system outside of the subdivision on North Arrington. So this is simply the supporting documentation. I'm happy to walk through it if you like. You know, up front is the memo. You'll see a table here that shows the milestones with this. We've really worked hard to formalize the dedication process with milestones and accountability steps so that we see these things taken to the end. There's a lot of difficulty created if these projects and the dedications and easements and infrastructure and things like that aren't officially followed through to the end. Ownership questions come into play. Just this past week, there's, you know, every day it seems like we have ownership questions the operations folks face. So it's very important that we do this stuff, and that's why we're being so formal about it. Besides the fact it's called for us to do this in our organization. So memos up front, simply a letter of intent. So we get that at the very beginning of a project. That's where the developer, the applicant, provides their intent of dedication at the beginning. The end of infrastructure, after everything's tested and accepted and they're ready to convey it to us, there's the application for dedication. And so within that is a value. Typically the engineer of record for the project determines that. We verify it, make sure it makes good sense. They determine that value. That's important to us as well. And then there's the easement dedication documents that follow that. And every one of these property associated documents like easements and whatnot goes through JDSB Legal for review as well. So it's been through planning and construction as well as Mr. Dormin's office. Then there's the legal description of the easement. There's at the very tail end a copy of the plat, and that's essentially the packet.
Are the easements in the, so those are private roads, that's why the,
They're a private road, and I was
we have
hoping somebody to
easements.
ask this question. You notice there's not specified easements that you see. Typically, you will see those centered around the water lines or the sewer lines or anything like that. Interesting thing with this project is that they're actually dedicating the entire private right-of-way to the joint water and sewer as an easement. It sounds a little strange. It is strange. What happened with this project is they originally intended to dedicate the right-of-ways within to be public. There were some issues with outside of water and sewer issues with drainage and roads and whatnot. County determined they did not want to take over right-of-ways. So right-of-ways are going to remain private. To expedite the process, the developer said, we're not going to go through the process of deeding specific easements to you. We're going to deed the entire internal private right-of-way to you. It's unusual. It's not preferred.
are the sewer lines under, in the streets,
They are. Yes, sir.
and the water lines are outside the streets?
They're outside the streets, yes, sir, in the shoulder.
What was the issue with the county not accepting them?
They did inverted crown on the roadways.
I was afraid of that.
Yes, sir.
So we don't assume any liability for any of that, then?
Actually, by action of deeding us the easement, it takes us out of a lot of liability if we have to go in there and repair any infrastructure.
But we do have to fix the pavement once we go in there and fix it, though.
We traditionally fix the pavement, yes, sir. We do.
Do they have some catch basins down the middle of the road too, or just,
There are drainage structures. There are, yes, sir. Inverted crown typically, as you know, they'll drain to the center and catch basins.
but
and
we're
move on out.
satisfied the sewers are far enough away from those to maintain them?
Yes, sir. The drainage and the, drainage in the sewer and the water, they have adequate separation, so.
Yeah, we don't want it to be our manholes to be drainage structures.
Correct, correct.
Are the manholes in the road?
There are some manholes in the road, from what I recall.
And then you said that it's an inverted crown? So if the road floods, will that go into the manhole?
If it's, yeah, it could. If it's located, well, the catch basins typically are at the low points of that inverted crown for the storm. And that's typically where the water will collect. We don't have any manholes located in those low points.
Oh, okay.
How'd they get the county to approve it,
To,
to approve the development with inverted crowns like that?
since it was left as private right of way.
Okay.
That was a concession there, from what I understand.
Don't they have construction standards for the roads?
County has minimum, correct. County has minimum required standards for roads. They do.
So their homeowners associations maintaining the roads then?
They will have to, correct.
But I don't think there's any requirement to notify them, I mean, new owners that they're responsible for the roads.
That should be disclosed and be clear on the plat. So at the time somebody's purchasing property out there, in their diligence, they should see that. Hopefully it's completely disclosed to them.
Is the contractor's warranty over with on the sewer lines?
No, sir, it's still in effect, still in effect.
How long was that for?
It's, typically it's 12 or 2 years after we accept the dedication document. So
Okay.
once they provide that to us.
So it'll be 2 years from today if we accept it.
Correct.
In general, on warranties, like, do we do like a end of warranty walk or an end of warranty review or
We do.
anything? Do we cable the line? Not
We
cable.
TV the lines.
We do TV the line at the end of, like, a month before
Yes,
the warranty expires? We put the burden on them to,
That's correct. And that wasn't happening, I don't think, with much regularity before, but now we're creating work orders to do that, to do a 12-month and then a, 12 plus 9 month or something to catch anything there at the end. So it's like anything else, warranty does you no good if you don't follow up with it. So.
Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. I make a motion the Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water and Sewer Commission accept the on-site water system and the on-site sewer system, along with associated easements within Tabby Place development as public infrastructure for ownership, operation, and maintenance.
I second.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, thank you. Next step with us for this, next milestone, is we take and notify our operations folks as official now. We change it in mapping. So now it'll go from red color, which means private, to blue and green, which means our public water and sewer. So, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Mathison liquid oxygen supply.
Good afternoon. What we're looking for today is approval for a modification to our existing Mathison liquid oxygen supply and storage vessel lease agreement. Right now, Mathison is our current provider for liquid oxygen. We use liquid oxygen down at Academy Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant. Currently, right now, we have 2 storage vessels in place at the plant, one that we own and one that we lease from Mathison. As many of you are aware, there's a rehab project that's currently out to bid right now to replace a decent amount of the piping system down there, and one of the components of that is also replacing the tank that we currently own. As part of the assessment of the project and on the recommendations of several people, engineers and the liquid oxygen supply folks, we need to replace that tank because it's starting to have some pretty significant deterioration in it. So after the evaluations of what it was going to cost to purchase the vessel ourselves, have it installed, and include it part of the package for the project, the decision here was made that instead of doing that and continuing ownership of one and leasing of the other, we would just move forward with leasing 2 storage vessels. So what you have before you today are the 2 options that Mathison gave us for an 11,000 gallon vessel. And really, the only difference in the two Exhibit As that you would be looking at is the term of the contract. It's a 60-month versus an 84-month contract, and the actual monthly service charge, and it's $200 a month difference between the two agreements. So obviously, if we go out the longer term, we pay $200 less a month, but we're also locked in for our supply on liquid oxygen for 2 additional years.
Is the product price for the supply the same?
It's
for
the
whole
same.
time?
We've actually pushed back and kind of are in a back and forth with them asking for a concession on that. But one of the things I didn't mention, if you read a little bit further in the memo, time is kind of the essence here. So if we want to be in construction starting on the rehab project in January, we need to go ahead and get the vessel kind of tied down now so that there's enough lead time for them to secure one and have it here to coordinate with our contractor. So we could come back at a later date if we're able to get any price concession and take that, and I'm pretty sure the commission would accept that. But basically, from a pricing on the product itself, this would be the highest that you would see.
But the .556,
It doesn't change if you go out longer right now. We haven't been able to negotiate that. And so one of the things to know, oh, I'm sorry.
we're paying right now.
This is the same price that we're paying now. They're holding our price. So one of the things, back in June of this year, we took a 15% price increase on the liquid oxygen itself, and also a 10% increase on the delivery charges. And that's pretty standard throughout the industry. Actually, one of the folks that had given us a bid when we bid this out about 14, 16 months ago, somewhere in there, they've actually taken 2 price increases in those same amounts, 15 and 10%. So that market, there's a significant demand increase. And then also, I think some of the things that are happening out, when we talk about the project itself, you'll see that what we were also hoping for the project, which is kind of separate from what we're talking about, but it's worth mentioning now, there's been changes in the stainless steel market with the tariffs and what have. So the amount of piping work that we're hoping to complete in the overall project will probably go from here to somewhere south of here based on how far our money will take us. So,
Is this replacing the safety equipment we talked about?
This right here, no, sir, this
no.
is just for the tank and the supply agreement. The safety equipment, we've got the quote in on that for Mathison. When we accept bids, my plan was to, when we get the bids in, bring the bid for the contracted portion plus the Mathison portion at the same time, so you see the full project at one time instead of piecing it along for you.
but the reason we went ahead and bringing the vessel today is because we need the lead time to get the vessel in so that we don't hinder the project starting in January as we had planned.
Is this lease to own?
No, sir.
So what happens to the vessel at the end of the?
So
lease
it's
period?
theirs, and so, you know, one of the things that we had talked about as recent as 12 months ago is that we may at one point go away from liquid oxygen at the plant. And so that was one of the beauties of doing this too. If we decide we don't want it, you know, they would just take it and be done with it. So we're not gonna own it, we're not gonna be responsible for maintaining it. We won't have, you know, the liability if something's wrong.
So
And that's why we wanted to have both of the vessels leased instead of just one. So right now, one we have now, we're responsible for everything, and the other one they're responsible for. So we would prefer that they be responsible for both of them.
The one that we're currently leasing,
Yes.
how long are we leasing that one for?
For,
The same one.
it'll be the same length. So that's the other thing. If you look on the agreement, there's actually 2 charges. So there's the one for the existing, and then there'll be the charge for the new one that has the arrow beside it. And we're actually still locked in at our old rate, and part of that is because of where we're at.
So we have an
Agreement.
existing contract for one that we're leasing,
Yes,
and we want to modify that contract to extend that contract to a longer term and add another tank.
yes, sir.
So for the one that we're leasing now, what is the length of the existing contract?
We
3 years left on the contract.
we have 3 more
3
years
years
left.
left.
Yes.
So another option would be to buy a new tank now and buy another tank in 3 years to replace the other one, as opposed to 2 lease tanks, and that we don't own anything at the end of the lease term.
And I think that was some of the things that were talked during the engineering of this, probably somewhere between 3 and 6 months ago, and the decision was we really didn't want to be in the tank maintenance business ourselves, or purchasing a tank and then having to contract for someone to maintain it, whether it was Mathison or someone else.
If you look at the two tanks we have down there now, we have the purchase tank and the lease tank. The lease tank is in substantially better shape than the purchase tank is. Because unfortunately, it's, tanks are easy to ignore and not do the maintenance you need to on them. So putting that on someone else there's a definite quality difference in the tanks.
Have we evaluated the cost of producing our own oxygen on site?
Putting in like a PSA.
Yeah.
From what we were told from Mathison, again, their supplier, they do the PSA equipment too, that we don't use enough oxygen to really make it economical to make it ourselves.
And we actually had another supplier tell us that too, because when we actually did, this is probably before you came on board, so sorry to interject. When we went through before we actually started the RFP process in 16 or 17, we actually talked to a couple of different suppliers about that very thing, and they all told us the same thing. Now, obviously, they're all incented to tell us that because they want us to buy gas from them.
What do we pay for oxygen a year?
It's about, about 400,000.
You have any idea what the cost of maintenance would be in a 5-year period on a tank?
As far as maintenance, there wouldn't be a ton of maintenance that would have to be done. You got the connecting valve to fill the tank, which constantly has problems because you're hooking and unhooking. Things happen there. You would have to periodically sandblast and paint the tank. So it wouldn't be a high dollar maintenance. But with that valve on the front end, if it leaks and it's their tank, they have to give us a credit for the oxygen that leaks out of the tank while they're filling it.
And they've done that before.
And they've done that before. If we own it and it leaks, we're paying for the gas that's going out into the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
The tank's $75,000, which y'all do.
Yeah, to purchase one and install it up front, and then for the life of an 84-month agreement, we kind of calculated about $30,000 to maintain it because we figured you'd have to paint it once in there, and then there's some checking of valves and some things like that that may have to get changed out over that time.
So it looks like it's break even.
It's pretty close to break even.
Basically, I think,
we would save a little bit of money by buying the tank, but it's not over a 7-year period. It's not going to be a whole lot each year. You're going to save less than $1,500 a year.
And if we maintain the tank, though, we would own it at the end of the 7 years.
We would own it at the end of 7 years, yes, sir.
Mhm.
If you ever decided, and for some information we got yesterday, we may not have to go away from liquid oxygen, but if we ever did, you'd have this tank that you don't have any other uses for.
But it'd be free at the end of 7 years, so
We would have to, not that it can't be done, it's just we'll have to, if we decide to buy tanks, we'll have to rebid the project to include prices of tanks.
yeah, we'll have to delay what we're doing probably too, because the lead time that would be involved in that.
I struggle with this a little because, I understand it's time sensitive, but I've recently gone through, some similar things, and I just looking at it, I believe there's some opportunity.
Yeah, just off the surface, it looks like we may be better off owning the tanks. Both of them.
I'd love to see us in the product price range, 10% or so lower than this too. Just looking at what I've seen, just looking at some things I've seen recently, I believe there's some opportunity on the product price as well.
Well, and I would say on that product price, just remember that's the new 15% increase that went into effect in June. So,
I'm accounting for that, yes, ma'am.
Is there any anticipation of how long you think we're gonna be in the oxygen business?
At least 10 years.
Okay. Okay.
Your desire is to speed this up so that we can have everything moving, so that in January, we can start repairing and,
Right. So I think originally, if we had had our druthers about this, we would have came and presented all of it to you as one single package, and this component wouldn't have been singled out, and it would have just been, we'd been talking about this agreement, the actual construction work that Mathison's gonna do, and then our contractor all as one package. But because of the timeline of getting everything engineered, we need to go ahead and make this decision about what term we're gonna do on the vessel. I kind of think we had already made the decision that we were planning on moving forward with leasing versus trying to buy and be in the tank business ourselves. Is that fair to say?
No, I was gonna ask, in terms of what you said a while ago about our other costs and what's going on, the change in direction from a lease to a purchase as part of construction, does that bust our budget?
Oh, yes.
We'd have to, budgets could be changed, but we'd have to change the budget to do
Mhm.
that.
I'm just asking.
And, you know, I don't wanna speak for Mark, but I'm pretty sure you're a fan of leasing the tanks.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am, because of the fact, even when they come down and do their inspection a couple of years when they're tank, they find a defect, they'll actually change the whole tank out, if they think it's necessary. And they'll keep the maintenance up on it. The tank that we own, it's been probably going downhill, even though we have inspected well, as well, a lot of the times that some of the things that need to be done, we had to schedule it ourselves to get them in there to do it, and it just was a kind of a situation that we couldn't control.
How old is that tank?
It was there when I got there, so at least 23 years old.
So it looks like you're looking at $90,000 for the lease in a 5-year period. I'm looking at the 5-year option versus $105,000 to own it. So in a 10-year period, you're looking at 180 versus 105. The ownership is much less expensive. Plus, if you own the tank, if you lease the tank, you're locking yourself into this supplier for 60 or 84 months. And we can't look at other alternatives during that time frame.
Not necessarily, because all the providers will lease tanks to you. If we decide to change the provider at any point, they would have to come in and bring new tanks in for the lease, if we wanted to lease it from them, but it could be done.
So the existing lease has an out?
Yes.
You could lease it for a year, and then after a year, tell them, come get your tank.
Yes, yes, because that's one of the things we had them write into the agreement in 17, because at that point, we actually thought we would be going away from liquid oxygen within the next few years. And really the reason they want to do the lease, I mean, obviously, they want to recover the cost of trying to put a tank here and the maintenance on it. So for us, it was, we're either going to spend $100 or $100+ grand up front and take away what we're going to do in piping and make it even smaller, or have to ask for more budget for the project, or we would lease it and pay, over the length of the agreement.
Is there a penalty if we terminate it early?
No.
Where are you seeing all that? I don't see that.
It's in our actual main agreement. This is just a separate exhibit. So I didn't bring the full agreement, like I said. I mean, that might be worth looking at, but.
okay.
I just, and again, I've owned several of these. I've been involved in some leases. I say I've owned, I hadn't personally owned, but I've worked for organizations that owned, been involved in some leases, and every time I ever looked at it, the purchase price ended up being the better option. There's definitely, if you include the maintenance of what they're claiming, but in my experience, they use very little maintenance. There's very little that goes wrong with them. The maintenance cost is normally minimal, and just looking at that product cost, that's just out of the realm of what I'm used to seeing. I'm not saying it's not good, but it's just out of the realm of what I'm used to seeing. So that was my concern. I mean, I wish we had another week or two to negotiate harder, and explore some other options. That would be ideal in my opinion.
Well, this includes the existing vessel too for that whole period of time, right?
Yes, sir.
And they would
Yes.
replace it if necessary.
Yes,
Yes.
So it's actually 2 tanks we'd be getting rather than just one.
yes, sir.
We already have one that we're paying for.
Okay.
When these tanks are no longer needed, what are we gonna do with them?
If we lease them, they'll go back to them and we won't have to be bothered with it. If they're ours, we'll have to, like the one that'll be as a part of this project, we're gonna have to dispose of that.
So the 1,500 and the
Well,
1,300.
that's what I was gonna say, if if it's ours, but as part of this agreement, if we've leased from them, they're going to take in the other.
They're gonna take ours that we have
They're gonna take the one that
and
we
bring
have.
on us a lease. Are we getting credit for the one they're taking?
Yeah, they're giving us some credit on the price of the tank so that they can go, they're gonna take our tank and refurbish
Right.
it and send it to someone else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, kinda thought they would.
So the 1,500 and the 1,300, two options are for two tanks,
Right.
not one.
No, it's for one additional one, so if
That's
you.
one additional, so it's,
Right, we're already leasing one from them. So
Okay.
the 13 or the 15 is just the difference in the term length. Basically, by going longer, you pay $200 less a month, but like you said, the agreement's 2 years longer for one tank.
for one tank. So there's another 1,300 or 1,500 for the other tank.
Actually, the existing tank is only $924.
Can we as a commission approve a 5-year lease and an 8-year lease?
We can, and that's part of why we bring it here, because it's outside of our normal terms that we do. Because normally, we don't do anything more than 5 years, and it's usually like 2 years with like 3 renewals. So,
Has Charlie looked at the contract documents?
Yes, sir. The original contract was put forward a year and a half ago. No, these are just exhibits to that original contract, so this is just changing the,
it's literally adding one vessel.
right. And that contract was approved by the JWSC.
Well,
And it's for how long?
There's 3 years left.
3
on
years,
that.
3 years left on it.
So Commissioner, do we like 5 years, or do we like 84 months? Which one do we like? I mean,
Like owning the tank.
Excuse me?
But you can terminate it.
I prefer owning the tank from a cost perspective, because, I mean, you're talking about, we would be comparing a second lease for the same time period, if you're looking at the 60-month lease, that would essentially double the cost of the tank.
what is the failure probability on tanks?
The failure probability is not high. The tank itself doesn't fail. Like I said, the main thing that's gonna require maintenance is the feed valve, where you're hooking up to it, because you're constantly opening and closing that valve, because we get deliveries once a week.
Right, so this
Okay,
tank lease
so-
includes those vaporizers,
So
those regulators,
what
and all of
would cause
that.
the supplier, if we lease the tank, to have to replace the tank?
I mean, there is deterioration and corrosion in tanks over time. I mean, it's not every 5 years or anything, but there is a potential that the tank could have problems. And there's always, debris and stuff that can cause problems.
Well, I guess I'm trying to figure out, what is the advantage to leasing versus buying? Just dealing with the tank itself.
I
If
think
it
that-
has a very low probability of failure,
Well, your vaporizers may fail, or those type things, and all of that's included, with the tank itself, as part of this agreement.
But
What-
they wouldn't put those on our tank if we had.
Right, so what I'll say is all the maintenance is to the vessel vaporizers, regulators, and the telemetering that would be associated with it. And I actually think, am I wrong, Mark? That's probably where your points of failure are gonna be more so than, being a non-technical person, there being a hole in the side of the tank.
Right,
It's
so
gonna
if we
be those
decide-
metering
If
devices.
we decide to
devices.
purchase tanks, we're gonna have to come back with a different agreement for them to maintain those vaporizers.
Right.
And things like that.
We're still gonna have to contract somebody to maintain that part of the tank, even if we own the actual
Well, with the
structure.
tank that we have there, can staff tell us what kind of issues we've had with the vaporizers and the valves and the instrumentation since it's been there?
The instrumentation itself, it requires a lot of maintenance. We have several valve stems, metering devices. The vaporizer itself, pretty much a no-brainer. They maintain, when we went from heated vaporizer to the ambient air, I call them twin towers, it just left us maintenance free. But as far as the delivery system that skid they're coming in with, that falls along with the contract, then that's where our main focus is, pretty much. And we would have to go out and get a contractor to service that, because the guy I can't train them enough on that particular item in order to keep it running safe and efficient.
Well, with the contract to maintain, I mean, if we went to owning the vessels, and if we contracted that out, how does that work? We just find somebody that's gonna do the work when we call them, and we pay when they come, or we gotta pay them so much a month whether they come or not?
Basically, we have to put them in a contract, or we won't pay them monthly.
You'd be paying a monthly.
And then we would have somebody who specializes in that area. We just can't get any contractor to come in and say, well, you know, they gotta know what this system does.
And if we're talking about, you know, the conversation's really about leasing or buying a new tank, but it's not just about that. We already have a tank that we're leasing. Are we gonna lease one and buy one, or are we gonna, if we're not, if we don't lease this new one, the additional one, are we gonna terminate the lease on the one we have now, or let it play out and then buy a second tank? I mean, why would we lease one and buy another one?
Well, one's under existing lease. You can let it expire and then replace it at that point, spread our capital out a little bit. I mean, it sounds like it's under exist. In my experience in the medical field, you know, these things have very little, and not only the medical field, but the medical maintenance field. There's not a whole lot that goes on with it there. To Mr. Rouse's point, there's definitely some maintenance that comes up now and again, but it's very low dollar value. We don't I mean, I've never done contracted maintenance where we've typically, you know, done the frontline cleaning and stuff, and then, you know, called people for service when needed. But again, that service is few and far between. And in my experience, it's better to own the tanks when I've run the numbers. Now, granted, I didn't run these, but you know, this might be a totally different animal. Than my experience was, it's much cheaper to own the tanks, and that does give us the flexibility to pick up the phone next year and call Mathison and say, you know, we're in time crunch here, so we have to, you know, go with this product price. But you know, as of March, we want to rebid it and see if there's not other, you know, product prices out there available. Which I do think there's some opportunity with the product price. So,
Well, is the product price tied somehow to whether we lease or own the tank? I mean, it's the same whether it's our tank or their tank?
Right,
Okay.
right, because we're 50-50 right now.
whether it's owned or not.
Right.
But if you called Air Gas, they're probably not gonna come fill Mathison's tank.
Right, no.
No,
No, they won't.
So we'd have to, in order to get competitive pricing from another vendor.
you'd have to
we would
include that as
we would
part
have
of the
to go
package.
through all this again and get a whole nother, you know, lease on the tank. We'd have to cancel the lease with this, get somebody to come in and remove it, schedule downtime, and change vendors. Versus if we own the tank, we just pick up the phone and say, hey, don't come next week, you come next week.
Well, if we buy the tank from Mathison, if we buy it and then we own it, would Air Gas consider filling it?
Once we own it,
Once
it's
it's
ours,
ours,
anybody will
yeah.
fill it. I wish there was an opportunity to, you know, bring this back in 2 weeks and let's do a little more, you know, detail, but, you know, that's,
I mean, we're in a situation where they didn't give us an alternative,
who did?
staff.
Oh.
I mean, if we're not satisfied with what's presented, then they're gonna have to rework it and come back in with a purchase. And where would you take the money for that? Out of,
Had to expand the budget for the R&R capital project.
you take it out of R&R.
It's the only place we would be able to get it.
And how much is a tank?
75,000, give or take. I mean, I'm not gonna say it's gonna be 75 on the nose, but it's in.
And,
Which is a 4.8-year payback, is a simple payback, not counting, you know, maintenance
yeah,
or interest
I
or
mean,
anything like that.
so I guess if the tanks last a long time, and under the current contract, which is 84 months, at the end of that time, will we still have to pay the amortization of the leased tanks?
Yeah, you still have a tank lease fee.
I have a problem with the fact that it sounds like it's a long-lived item. And not much goes wrong with it. and we can be out of the purchase as soon as we do the purchase. Then the only thing we have as an operating cost, it would be a capital item, correct? An asset instead of an expense. So what you're doing is you're adding to the expense line of the operations. Essentially, I would assume that they're since they're want an 84-month period, they're planning on recapturing their capital in 84 months, and then everything for them is gravy for that amount. So unless you can provide a compelling cost for lease, I would like to see an analysis that says that buying is better than leasing, if it is, and you to come back with it in 2 weeks and tell us, because, you know, I reiterate again, you told me there's not much failure. You said that there's maintenance and they take care of it, and we don't want to take care of it because we don't do it very well. That is our problem.
We can certainly come back in 2 weeks with a option to buy. That can be done.
I mean, is that what the commission wants to do? Am I the only?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to defer item 5 and until staff can bring us back a proposal to purchase the tank in 2 weeks or the next meeting.
I think we should take competitive bids on the tank, but also on the product. I mean, I think we should put out an RFP for the product, and even if it's in the one, I mean, it'd be inconvenient, granted, to have one vendor filling one tank and one vendor filling the other. But if we're under current contract for the one tank, you know, then buy the new one, put out an RFP for who's bidding it. That would be my recommendation. Let's competitively bid the pricing. And
So, just to make sure, you want us to have 2 separate oxygen suppliers?
I don't think that's ideal, but I mean, if our current contract says we can't on the one, then no, I don't think that's ideal by any means. But if it saves $50,000 a year, a little bit of convenience, you know, to save.
Yeah, I would make that part of the motion, but I'd also say whether we ever go that route or not, whether they're 2 suppliers, that's a whole different question. But I think the board needs to see what those numbers are.
We need to realize that oxygen is the most important part of this plant. We have to have an oxygen supply at this plant. So, I mean,
Well, you can't.
I'm not sure we want to have 2 different oxygen suppliers.
Yeah, that's definitely not ideal, but.
Yeah. Well, I just said that whether the board actually goes that way or not is a whole different question. But I just to get an answer to that question, what the rate would be for oxygen from other suppliers. Yeah, we can get that and look at it.
But if we have my point is, if we have a 3-year contract left on the existing tank, but the contract says we can cancel at any time anyhow, then, you know, in that transition period when we're setting tanks up, if there's a, you know, supplier for this tank, supplier for this tank, while not ideal for a 3-month period during the transition phase, at some point you're gonna have to transition.
Aren't both ends of that oxygen system tied together? I mean, it's continuous. So do we have a minimum take on the existing contract?
No.
For product?
No.
So we don't have a minimum take, a minimum on the existing contract. So if we did go with 2 different oxygen suppliers, then we would be in a position to where we could have competitive bidding from 2 tanks, and we could take the full supply from either end if we wanted to.
Well, I think it's a you know, 3-year thing or something. You bid it out every 3 years and say, what are you services for the, you know, the next 3 years? What will you give us product for? And, you know, during that transition period, there might be a time where this tank has just been filled by Mathison and this is somebody else. If Mathison loses it, they might get competitive. I just looking at the numbers, I don't.
And am I right, Mark, right now, the way that the reorder is generated is like through telemetry, right? They know when there's time for delivery?
They know when it's time for delivery. Call it to them.
Right.
And the thing is that they still, current company still own the equipment, which is the twin towers and the delivery system at the other end. So therefore, by them filling a different company filling the tank is not feasible. You know, this company come in, he fills one, and if somebody's not there to tell him what tank he needs to fill, they don't send the same driver all the time. So he may put it supposed to put it in. So, I mean, I feel that we should finish out this contract for the next 3 years, and then we want to bid, then we would bid for a different product, companies to deliver the product.
If we just use one tank, they just have to fill it up more often, is that
So,
right?
they go to both tanks. We only budget fee when we have maintenance issues, where we gotta shut one side down. But they fill both tanks, both tanks.
So we'll be back in 2 weeks.
Well, we haven't
Well,
decided yet.
we have to
We haven't decided
vote on
yet. Right.
the motion.
I'll second his motion just for the sake of, it's motion was to,
Tabling-
yeah, to defer it to the
Tabling
next
this
time.
matter for 2 weeks.
Yes. But in the discussion, I see as we discussing this, we need to direct staff to give us some options. It's this option to buy, I mean, to purchase is fine, but it may come back and they run the numbers and it may look better to
Well,
lease.
I
So
think they need to do a
so they need to
full
give a
make or buy,
comparison.
or make or lease, correction,
Right.
buy or lease
Right.
paper on it.
Essentially, the business case, but
That's correct.
business case both ways.
Yeah. And then we can decide, I think we'll have an option to decide, and have a little more information so we can make that decision. And all the arguments are fine, and I can see that, but, you know, we just need, when those numbers ran, then we can take a closer look at what it would be.
Okay,
Because I agree with all of y'all.
okay. So,
I just second that motion.
okay, so we're tabling this matter for 2 weeks. I would really like to have the paper next week. Let's see, when is the next meeting?
3 weeks, December
3
6th.
weeks, okay. 1 week prior to the meeting, I would like to have the paper delivered to the commissioners.
Just put the maintenance on that we've done on the tank also.
Yeah, everything,
That we've done in 23 years or whatever we've got. on it.
yeah. Okay? All right, are there any other comments or questions before I call the question for vote? Okay, all those in favor of tabling, please raise your right hand. Okay, thank you.
That would be deferring. Defer it, not table it.
Or defer, okay. My mistake. Please use the word defer.
Table it kills it.
Okay, Mark?
I know we took a vote on what we just talked about. I just want to, before we start on our monthly chart and parameters that we normally do, I just want to let you guys know, let you all know that we had a great teacher that came in us who actually worked and built the UNOX system, the oxygen delivery, and understand the optimization of oxygen and wastewater. We had his grace this week. We did 4 classes. We invited each and every one to come out. One of the commissioners came out, and also Andrew. And he kind of briefed us on where we were 23 years ago when I had just got there and where we're at now. The system was designed as a UNOX system, oxygenated, where it would work off pressure and vent purity. And we so far away from that now that we're actually working off aeration for DO, DO at the end of the chamber, as he called it, the train. And we make our adjustment based on that. That's where we was trained. That's where we continue to train and train and train over the years. But we want to get back to where we need to be. And like I said, we had his grace to come in, and his name was Daniel Gay. He got about 40 years in the business of oxygen. He was there with Union Carbide years ago when they was around and developed this technique for oxygenating biologically. We have these books here. I was in the process of making some more up because I know we ran out during the class, and I would like each and every one of you to have one so y'all would better understand how the system works down there.
Okay.
That's it. Okay, the monthly chart for Academy Creek, starting at Academy Creek here. If you look at October and see the influent flow was relatively low for the month of October. Pine Over, They had a couple of shutdowns during the month. Some was unauthorized, but against permit for doing so, and we instructed them that's not what we like to see. Evidently, they was doing some maintenance. Either they was doing some maintenance, or they was trying to control the BOD. One of the two. As you go along, BOD was quite high during that month. Well, higher than normal, 172 on the influence side. TSS was 172 on the influence side. As you can see, we had a little bit more NH3 ammonia come through. And the plant, looking at the back end, the plant does very well of removing most of the ammonia, down from a 31 down to a 9. And again, we always do very well as far as remove efficiency, and not much rain. Well, total rainfall was 4 inches. And sludge to the landfill, along with water meter reading. Any questions on Academy Creek? Moving right along to Dunbar Creek, which is your next page over, beyond your graph. A little bit at about average flow for the month, 61% capacity. All the numbers pretty much fall in line with the month before and the following months before those. High removal rate, and that'll be it. Questions on Dunbar?
Mark,
Yeah.
Where are you measuring the rainfall?
Yeah, I'll ask that question.
Well,
The rainfall measurements come from the National Weather Service weather stations that are closest to each plant.
Well, it's probably closer to the plant I am, but you know what, in July, I'm just going back to July and looking. I don't see how you go in July 83% over here at the float. Now I'm looking back on the left. Float at capacity 83%, and that correlates with the rain gauge at my house. And I mean, I got an official rain gauge, but I check it because I get calls from the county to come clean out, and I just like to know. But anyhow, going back, if you look in July, this all correlates to what I found. I've kept my records. In August, it went down 70% flow capacity. September, 64. October, 61. So that come down. We had the highest rain totals in July and August, all year. We've had all year. I recorded, I think, close to 18 inches out there where I live. Now, I know it's not St. Simon, but it ain't that far from it.
Well,
And Lord, we're looking over here at only.
Well, I would say if you look at the other two pages that have like I said, we're pulling 3 different rain gauges,
Yeah.
they're showing twice that amount of rain.
Yeah,
per month, so.
yeah. And, the more rain we get, the more I we gonna have. And so I think it's the rain driving that up, but I guess my problem is it just doesn't seem to indicate over here, that's on the rainfall numbers. But that's just an observation I'm making at the numbers there, based on what I've seen around where I live. Seems like it's off.
Yeah, my question about that is the I&I. In other words, we're supposed to be doing something to alleviate some of that. And where are we with are we making strides? I thought maybe we're making strides because of this.
We are basically in the process of preparing to do the smoke testing contract at St. Simon's Island. We're developing the RFP and the specs to go out and do smoke testing, which typically smoke testing uncovers a lot of rain-dependent I&I because you're uncovering the leaks from the surface. You see where the smoke comes
Right.
out of the ground. You know that's a place where there's rain can get into our system. Sometimes it's the holes in the vent holes in the manhole lids, but very, very frequently there's a lot of I&I that comes in through the laterals that aren't properly maintained in the private ownership or buildings.
We haven't-
Laterals being the service line from the buildings to the line.
We have done rehab work on several manholes on St. Simon's this
Yeah.
year. We've lined a couple of segments of pipe,
Yeah.
and seed foams, so we are making progress. Unfortunately, it's a never-ending process, but we are making progress on it.
They got to
By
end
the time
somewhere.
you get through the system, what you've already lined is ready to be lined again. Not always that simple, but by the time you get everything lined, the other stuff, 15, 20 years old.
Okay.
I will say the loan we talked about at the last meeting, the GFA loan, we're including $5 million in there for line rehab, so hopefully that'll make a dent.
Cool. All right.
I have a question on the sludge that turns to landfill.
Yes, sir.
Dunbar, the flow is about almost a half of the Academy Creek, but the Academy Creek has 3 times the amount of sludge, but Academy Creek, we also use a dryer. So why do we have so much more sludge at Academy Creek than we do at Dunbar Creek?
We waste sludge every day, sir. We press sludge, we dry, and we go wet.
But we do it at each plant too, so
Yes, yeah,
do we have a breakdown so we know what the operating cost is at each plant per month?
I don't know right off the top of my head. We have, we've started this year, we've broken the actual purchasing cost into the 3 divisions. I can get you the numbers pretty quickly on what the chemicals and sludge costs and the power cost are, which are, those are your 3 main ones there. I can get that for you pretty quickly, but I don't know them right off the top of my
This
head.
is Academy Creek, we got less power, but we got more.
Right.
So
Power at Academy is around 125 per million gallons. But that doesn't include the oxygen price, so it's gonna be way lower. The Dunbar Creek's around 200 per million gallons for power. But again, you're paying for blower capacity there.
but shouldn't, the sludge should be about the same amount each plant.
Should be pretty close on the ratio, yes.
Hey, how old is Dunbar Creek plant? How old? What's this?
where it was rehabbed in 2005, 2006.
Spurs, can I ask a question on the, as far as the sludge production from the 2 plants? Being that there's a really difference in the technologies we use to treat the effluent, the water coming in, using the pure oxygen tanks, with the kind of contact we get there, residence time might be different. We know we've got some defects in the 2 aeration tanks over at Dunbar. Could it be that we're just less efficient at that plant?
You've actually got
What's
it
the-
backwards
what's
with the
backwards,
data,
though?
data is. No,
I don't know.
So we don't get completely sidetracked. If anyone wants to discuss the very nerdy details of this, we can hang around afterwards. Don't want to bore everybody.
We're on the Southport,
I'll leave that alone.
which is, less utilized plant. We produce 350,000 gallons of inflow. As you can see, the percent capacity is way down, quarter percent of 100.
Mark, do you ever think we'll get to at least 50% use that
Out of Southport.
capacity at Southport?
Southport.
What you think we have to do to get to be able to use that? Build some more subdivisions out there, or have some people tap in, or what?
It's just gotta grow. Yeah, it's gotta
We're
chop
getting there one house
it.
at a
It's a time.
Well, we're fixing the line and everything, so that should,
But being rural though, it's gonna be, people are gonna go for septic tanks versus coming on the system. I know. So unless we get subdivisions that really want to, have that, to tie into our systems, we're gonna always have issues, I imagine.
well, I don't know that we have
Unless-
a sewer line
unless when
out
it-
there, but we need to look at putting sewer lines out there. Cause
Well, that's what I'm talking about, as far as, capacity. Right now, we're at 24%. I'm trying to think, how can we get that up to at least 50%?
I agree.
Population,
Oh, yeah, you're right. Get
population.
some people out there.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, most times, if you build a subdivision, most, in a rural area, a lot of people want to go ahead and do septics. But it all depends on the developer, how you're developing it too, I imagine. Or the ease in tying in.
Well, I think it's the kind of the technology that we're using out there.
Well, every subdivision comes in out there, we're gonna probably recommend sewage water.
Everybody that was in
Right.
500 feet of
And,
facility.
and there's one subdivision that's already built that's got dry sewers, that when people build houses, they're gonna be tying onto those
Yeah,
sewers.
When we talked
Okay,
about
we-
the
okay.
3114 project, I think there was.
Are we
87
requiring them to have, to do that?
They got sewers already out there, so yeah, they won't even build a septic tank, those lots. There's some,
Have sewers that,
there's sewers already in the subdivision, but the houses have not been built. It was being held up
Okay.
because we didn't have capacity. Now we have the capacity because of what we approved last month, I think.
okay.
So that's one, how many lots are in that subdivision?
It's less than 100, yeah.
It was less than 100, but just upstream of there, we had some potential apartment complex chatter in there too, so.
Section, not 8, but section 10 or something, section, so.
I'm not sure.
Well,
We do have one hotel site plan that's under review right now. So there'll be a nice customer there. And also some people that explore mention the subdivisions.
well, what we need to do is get some people that want to build out there and have them give us an unsolicited proposal to extend the line out to them where their subdivision is.
These people are actually right off of Bucksmont. So we have
There is a force main on
it's larger than
Yeah.
it needs to be right now.
What?
But it's, the 16-inch force main on Bucksmont, there's one parcel of land that somebody showed interest in doing a subdivision. And generally, if they want it, well, if they're within 500 feet, they have to tie on. That's one thing, but also if they want the density, less than, they have a full acre for a well and septic.
So if that subdivision's within 500 feet of a force main, they have to tie on that subdivision.
That's correct, yes, sir. Yes, sir. If we say it's available, yes, that's right.
And it's available now since we got the pump station.
Yeah, maybe we have to have our own water sewer EDA.
Maybe.
Advertise our product.
Well, I mean, we need to encourage development where we have capacity.
Yes.
And if we can do my mind's stuck. We can do an unsolicited, have them give us an unsolicited proposal that essentially their tap fees that they would pay us anyway, pays for the infrastructure that they have to put in to be there. Then what that does is gives us customers with brand-new facilities that won't require maintenance for a good long period. And that money can be used to fix other portions of the system.
I want to commend the
Good
staff,
advertising.
and Mark for having that gentleman come and give that presentation to them, because I think it's going to really help the operation of the Kennedy Creek plant. It can be more efficient. The operators understand more about the technology and everything, so I think we need to.
It was very exciting having him here.
Yeah, I look forward to getting a copy of,
Yeah.
and
I was trying to choose between you and Mr. Tripp, because I know he's very interested in that area as well. But I was gonna give those.
but if you have an opportunity to have him back, I certainly would like to be invited.
He will, on having him back, he has talked about, he does pure oxygen consulting nationwide for both industrial plants and municipal plants. And so he had been here approximately 25 years ago, and apparently there was not a whole lot of interest at that time in speaking with him about the services. He said that he would start checking on us regularly now when he's in the area, because he has to go down, Fernandina to check on their plant fairly regularly, so he'll be in this area a lot more frequently, stop by and check in on us and see what he can help us out with, so. He's definitely a resource. He was one of the gentlemen that was part of the UNOX design team at Union Carbide, so hard to get better information than the guy that created it.
Mr. Riles, where it says flow in MGD as percent of capacity, Is that percentage, is that average or is that peak?
Average.
Average, so that's average every day, we were at 83%.
Right.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mark. All right, we're in the discussion, strategic business plan. I'd like to say a few words here before Mr. Junkin starts. I'll wait till all the commissioners get in before I say much more.
They having a meeting back there or something.
Yeah, I
What?
think so.
Look like they're having a meeting back that way. Everybody's going back there.
Yeah. So,
You're invited.
Well, thank you.
Rick just went back there with me. I guess he had to go back there with you.
Go on there.
I'm going to get sodas.
Go on there.
Y'all are funny, man. Y'all
I
funny.
ain't going there.
I ain't either. I'm not either.
You know what I'm saying there?
Yeah, we talking about you. Yes, we are.
Oh, I got you.
Yes, we are.
Gentlemen, can I ask, when y'all are speaking, if you will please make sure that your microphones are turned on and that you're speaking?
I have to keep turning mine off, and it's already mentioned, I don't need to crack one either. All these minutes weren't here. Cracking the minutes.
Hey, we're trying to save money on minutes by making you turn your microphone on.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not doing a good job. I'll tell you. Not at all.
Is that what Mayor said?
He loves doing that.
Say again? Oh, he is? Oh, well, I guess we'll have to go ahead and start. Okay, let me give kind of a preamble here before Jimmy, or the executive director starts talking. When I came on board in the commission in January of 2013, we had a lot of problems. One of them, the major problems we had was the organization didn't function like an organization. It more or less functioned like fiefdoms, and people were encouraged not to bring problems forward or to do anything that would cause an increase in the rates or assets at that time. And so the executive director was removed, and we started trying to rebuild the organization, the commissions at the time, with Mr. Swan. And then some issues came up, and he had to be let go also. So there was a period in which we got a master plan, and it had a pretty good layout of the issues regarding the quality of the assets of the utility. But some of the population projections didn't seem to fit what the actual reality of population growth within Glynn County was. And we hired Mr. Junkin to come in, and he basically spent about a year trying to understand the issues of the master plan, trying to put together an organization such that things moved well. He had a lot of parts that were working, but he needed to get it so that all the parts were working together towards a common goal. And I think that with the presentation this afternoon on his strategic business plan, you'll see that we're ready to really start functioning as an organization with everyone having a common vision of what the future needs to look like and the things that we need to accomplish that. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Junkin.
Thank you, Chairman, and I will say that the experience I've had here in the last several months working with the staff on our strategic business plan is one that's somewhat unique for a utility our size. A lot of utilities a good bit bigger than us don't ever go through the process and develop a strategic business plan. And they have plans of operation and what they're gonna do, but I do think that we're out there on the leading edge for a utility the size we are to do what we're doing. And to back up some of the things the chairman said, certainly in the last few years, the utilities faced some challenges. We've identified a lot of the issues within the organization. Various initiatives have been taken. We're working on each of those problems and issues to one degree or another. We definitely, early on, recognized the need for overall strategic planning to guide us through to a point where we're focused on what we're doing and understand the direction we're headed. We looked at we devised conceptual mission statements, which were not that difficult to do because in our industry, the clear issues that you have with mission statement are about the same. It's not hard to do all of this. We look to the industry standard for strategic business plan development. We looked at the stuff that AWWA and WEF, they're the two major trade organizations that work in our industry for wastewater and water. They pooled their resources several years back and developed what they call the 10 attributes of effective utility management, which we've distributed copies to everyone here, and if you don't have it, I'll be glad to get you another copy. But basically, it's a work between the two major trade organizations that took larger utilities who have plenty of resources and abilities and time to throw at a lot of different problems and a lot of issues and develop approaches that work for them. To learn from their experience, they consolidate all that into the 10 attributes and then distribute it out broadly to all the members and organizations that are tied to the two. We looked at that, and as part of the process, we looked at their, I guess, their strategic plan assessment cycle. And the first thing you've got to do is a self-assessment. You look at the 10 attributes, you see where you are as an organization, and assess what your status is on each of those 10 attributes before you develop your strategic business plan. Because you need to understand what your issues are before you work in to know what you want to do in the business plan. The next step is to sit down in the strategic business plan. You look at your mission statement, you develop objectives, and with the objectives, you determine what your initiatives are going to be to make those objectives happen. The objectives are supposed to support the mission statement. All that's supposed to work together. To boot, you're supposed to be developing key performance indicators or KPIs that help you measure the effectiveness of your initiatives. So in turn, you understand whether you're getting things done to improve and support the mission or not. With that done, you implement your initiatives so that they're part of your organizational outcomes. You start to look and measure the impact of those initiatives. So you got to collect the data, you got to tabulate it, then you got to look at it, analyze it, reflect on it, figure out, am I getting what I need to get done here? Do I need to make changes? You're basically back in the self-assessment mode to determine if it's time to make a change. In everything I'm saying here, strategic plan, business plan is not a solitary document. It is a living document or static document. It is a living document that we have to constantly looking at to determine if we need to be making changes to better improve what we're doing and to work towards continuous improvement. In the self-assessment mode, again, we looked at the 10 attributes of effectively managed utilities. We ranked the ones that for achievement, ranked them all for achievement, and we looked at a matrix of achievement versus importance. And on that scale, the achievement scale, 1 is poor, 5 is great. A rank of importance to the organization, 1 is poor, 10 is great. Went from there and set up, and this is basically how they shook out.
And we won't get into all the individual ones right now. But needless to say, the top three are most important to the success of the organization. The bottom three are those that are most in need of further work to achieve for our organization. And we're gonna get into the details of what that's all about here in a minute. In the areas, in the attributes of what's most important to our organization, financial viability was ranked number one. Establishes and maintains an effective balance between long-term debt, asset values, operations and maintenance expenditures, and operating revenues. The next one was operational optimization. It goes without saying how important that is. We need to be at our peak on all the issues that affect operations. And this ensures ongoing, timely, cost-effective, reliable, and sustainable performance improvements in all facets of its operations and service to public health and environmental protection. The third one is infrastructure strategy and performance. Plans infrastructure investments consistent with community needs, anticipated growth, system reliability goals, and relevant community priorities, building in a robust adaptation strategies. Basically, are we flexible to handle the curveballs that get thrown at us? As things change, we want to be able to work to that. And if you'll notice these last two, the operational optimization and strategic strategy, infrastructure strategy and performance, both of those, we'll talk about later, really rely heavily on strategic asset management or formal asset management program. We need to understand what the condition and system is in our assets, and from an operational optimization, it's easy for you to say. You need to understand what you're doing with your assets, how you're utilizing your resources, and asset management allows you to gather the data to allow you to assess that. Next. From an achievement standpoint, the worst issue we've got is community sustainability. We need to be able to integrate water resource management with other critical community infrastructure and social and economic development planning to support community-wide resilience, support for disadvantaged households, community sustainability, and livability. And we'll get into some of the initiatives in meant to further explore that. The next one on the list was employee leadership and development. Certainly we want to recruit, develop, and retain a workforce that is competent, motivated, adaptive, and safety focused. Just the key elements we want in everything. The last one in this group is enterprise resiliency. We want to be proactive. We proactively want to identify, assess, and establish tolerance levels for and effectively manage a full range of business risk, including the interdependencies with other services, utilities, legal, regulatory, financial, environmental, safety, physical, and cybersecurity, knowledge loss, the loss of people retiring that have all this institutional knowledge that we know is going on in every institution, loss of talent, natural disaster-related stuff, which we've experienced in recent years, consistent with industry trends and system reliability goals. Okay, with the assessment done, and we've moved on to developing the strategic business plan straight up. Next. The process, as I explained a while ago, we looked at our mission statement, we developed objectives, we developed initiatives that supported those objectives, and the KPIs that allowed us to, or that we believe will put us in the right direction as far as making those things happen and allowing us to measure whether we're getting the right things done. Next. The mission statement simply states, it is the mission of the Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water and Sewer Commission to safeguard the public health and safety by providing sufficient drinking water and environmentally responsible wastewater treatment in a financially sound manner while meeting or exceeding all regulatory requirements and supporting planned growth in the community. Pretty straightforward. Pardon? 10 objectives. From this, we're going to go to the 10 objectives that we developed. And this is the category. We basically broke our 10 objectives down into 5 cumulative categories. Initiatives down into 5 cumulative categories. First is environmental compliance. We want to maintain regulatory compliance with all permits. We want to educate the public on compliance efforts and results. We want to reduce business downtime from boil water advisories. We want to improve sewer capacity through I&I reduction. The next one is responsible decision-making, or as I call it, being data-driven. Data-driven, we want to look at, to expand strategic asset management program. Again, we talked briefly about the importance of those issues to the health of our overall organization and operations and providing reliable service efficiently. Improve budget controls for each operating division. We've taken some steps towards that already, and part of that initiative is basically already in the works and ongoing. Improve inventory control and measures. We're working through that as I speak. The light's at the end of the tunnel, I believe, for our organization to get there. Decrease maintenance inefficiencies. Again, that falls back to some of the things we talked about on asset management and better planning. The next issue or category is community resources. We said educate the community on the value of water, wastewater services. We want to facilitate simpler development practices, make it easier for us to get developments through the processes, make it smoother, quicker, smarter for our developers and business folks. Determine where the system expansion should be prioritized, and that's going to take concerted effort working with our other community entities. Eliminate sewer capacity issues before they become roadblocks to future growth and expansion. The next issue, or the next category rather, is customer service. We want to improve public trust with values-based customer service. We want to ensure customer billings are equitable. We want to work to make monthly bills more affordable for low-income customers. We want to provide consistent information to the customer base. And the last category is workforce development. Ensure continuing education requirements are met for the credentialed employees. We want to provide consistent training for non-credentialed staff. We want to improve employee safety through training and auditing. We want to document institutional knowledge of tenured employees. Again, rescuing that knowledge. Moving on. So at this point, we've identified our initiatives, our objectives, and the initiatives to support them, and it's time to start implementation. The schedule you see there in front of you is a 12-month schedule starting in January this coming year. And you'll notice that there's a lot of flags and pins sticking to that chart of time. They're a little bit heavier on the front end. You see it seems like they're a little more dense. Well, that's because what we talked about earlier in the discussion is the fact that we've got a lot of foundational programs and processes that were never really formalized and set in motion in a formal way to make sure they're on an ongoing basis being maintained and acted on. So in the front end of our calendar, the first 2 quarters, we're going to be heavily working on the issues that are what we call foundational. You know, it's the kind of things in an older institution or older utility you take for granted. Everybody's got those things going. You don't need to think about it. I mean, this is stuff that was such second nature to most of those folks that came in from outside. Anyway, I digress. The latter part of the schedule, in the last 2 quarters, the initiatives that we're going to be kicking in should all be the more strategic in nature. Less, okay, we should already have it going on. We should be doing these things already. No, these are the things that are above and beyond all that. Try to make us a better organization. Certainly as we go through and implement these as a whole, we want to see that there will be major change and continuous improvement as a part of the process throughout the organization. One of the things I want to say about this calendar, now this says, this is when we're going to have these things working. This is not an overnight, it's not a light switch. Because we go in and we have these programs and processes implemented and programs kicking in and everybody's doing their thing, we're looking at our numbers, we're trying to do the things we've got to do to make things better. That doesn't mean at the end of 12 months, the institution here, Joint Water Sewer, is going to be lights out, on fire, you know, everybody wants to come see us. How do we ever get this good? It's going to be a continuous hard grind. We're not going to be able to relax. We're going to have to stay with it and have patience and perseverance to make sure that things we're doing here we continue to do for the long haul. Not to say that some of them won't get adjusted as we go.
In the first quarter, we want to clearly define organizational values. One of the things that we want to talk about is what do we value in the way we perform our tasks? How do we treat our customers? How do we treat each other? What are we doing as an institution? What are the things we expect from the way we conduct business and the kinds of things we do in our business? So that'll be the first initiative. Monthly operating budget review meetings. We're basically already doing that, not so much formally, but staff, and I know Andrew's done a very good job of making sure with his superintendents that they're looking at the monthly numbers to see where people are at on the line items in their budget. We're tracking that. We're going to keep them accountable. John's doing a good job of keeping all the other senior managers tuned in on what's going on with their budget. But we're going to make it's going to become more formalized as we go along, and we're going to be engaged in making sure that everybody's on budget. When we're not, we're going to understand why, when it happens. Plan development review workflow mapping. That's the next initiative. One of the things that we have a sense for is that we need to be more effective and efficient sometimes with our plan reviews for new projects, new developments, new business that come in. So one of the things we want to do is map the workflow of what we do, understand all the steps in the process, look at what we do, when we do, how long it takes us to do it, people, or the resources. We want to understand those things, so we want to map it out so that we can then adjust and start to see the areas where we can make improvements and help those folks out, help our business community and developers out. In conjunction with this, and it's maybe something that we're going to hit on a little bit later, we're going to work and see how we, in the mapping process, we want to see how we, in our process, map back out to other entities that we interface with, be it the county, be it the health department, be it whoever, as part of these development reviews. We want to make sure that we understand all the steps where we're engaged, not just the ones that are conducted inside these four walls. The monthly compliance campaign. This is going to be an educational process to try to inform the community about all the compliance issues we deal with. Each month we'll focus on a different compliance issue. Like, for example, the example given to me this morning was like maybe in the month of January we would talk about the fats, oil, and grease problems. What we do with it, how do we manage it, why do we manage it? So it would be an educational process. And over time, we'll be doing that for all the various things that we do within our organization that affect compliance with one regulation or another. Continuing education requirements audit. One of the things we have is a lot of credentialed employees who have various licenses and certifications that require as part of their job to do their job. So we want to make sure that those folks are audited to get their hours in, get their credits in, and make sure not only that they're getting them, but they're getting the right kind of continuing education that benefits what they actually do, as opposed to going to the conference, checking the box, I sat through the class, and just mindlessly getting credits. We're really going to try to focus on making sure that the kind of credits they get are the ones they need for the job they do. In the second quarter, we want to look at customer payment assistance program. I know one of the things we want to do, we're about to go into a contract with CCGA, and basically our intent is to start the Roundup program and collect the dollars, whatever we can get, and hopefully by the second quarter of next year, next calendar year, we'll have funds in our hands, seed monies, to basically be able to go out and start assisting some of our customers out in the community. How much we can help them will all depend on how much seed money we're able to accrue. We may have to study on that a little harder to make sure there's some other opportunities to grow that seed money. But that program's coming, and we hope to have it in some form of function by the second quarter of next year, even if it's just one or two customers to start out with. St. Simon's Island smoke testing. We talked a little bit about that. This is the next step in managing the I&I issues on St. Simon's Island. We want to go out there and see where the rain-dependent I&I seems to have the greatest effects on our lines, and go out and try to proactively identify the things that need to be fixed, both in our assets and in the private assets that connect onto us. So that's coming. The weekly maintenance planning. I think Mr. Burris spoke about that. to each of us on different occasions. Weekly maintenance plans, one of the things that we've experienced, which a lot of government entities experience, is that too often in the government sector, utilities in particular, folks come in at the beginning of the day and their planning mode is fairly loosey-goosey. Oftentimes they may have one or two things on their mind that they want to do. Sometimes they'll walk in and they're just waiting to see what the reactive issues are on the table when they walk in. And if there's not something already waiting on them, they may not always have their day planned such that they've got something they can do to be effective and efficient. And what we've learned is that anytime you do weekly planning, you start to evaluate what you are doing, how much you're doing. You start to get a handle on making everybody more accountable for the hours they spend at work. If you're planning, you also have efficiencies of what you're getting done by understanding the things you gotta look at in advance, preemptively going out and checking out jobs, making sure that they're ready for the staff when they come out to do it, and getting more, as you figure out what you are doing right, what you're doing wrong, this weekly planning is gonna help you get more and more out of our folks and become more effective and efficient as an organization. Monthly work group with local authorities. I talked about that briefly in saying that understanding that we are a community resource, community asset, we've got to take our responsibility to connect with the other groups in our community and understand what their plans are. For example, the county, the city, the EDA folks, and other entities that work with us. We've got to understand what they're doing, and we want to make sure that our goals and objectives are in line with what theirs are. We want to make sure that the community as a whole gets the most optimal outcome from our efforts. So we got to work, and we've already started the process of making the contacts, and we're already meeting with some of the other entities to review capital planning, paving planning. We started talking, making the first moves towards looking at consolidated management of project reviews and new business reviews that come through, instead of having everything kind of segmented and compartmentalized between the various entities. Learning management system for all personnel. One of the things we've got that we've been brought to our attention, Mr. Sellers brought to our attention, that there's a lot of soft skills and sometimes technical skills that we don't provide training on to our staff, and certainly some of our uncredentialed staff could always use some extra help in that area. So we've developed a program that will allow us to pull basically a free program. Is that correct?
No, sir, that one's not free.
The LinkedIn?
LinkedIn Learning is not free, no, sir.
Oh, okay, well, we have initiated.
It's cost effective though.
It's cost effective. It's very inexpensive. We have started, initiated the steps to start allowing people to pull coursework out of that, and I think Mr. McCallum from down at SPNM, we've got at least one of our employees that is just, he's all over it. He's really raving about it, and I think that's going to be a case for a lot of our employees when they take a little time to check it out. In the third quarter, as we start to shift more towards the strategic stuff, we're looking at safety council site visits. Right now we have a safety council that goes over all the various incidents, they review them, find out what happened, they make recommendations. Frequently, those folks make recommendations in absence of information and knowledge. They don't have the experience, they haven't been out there with the folks that are getting hurt, having the issues and accidents function on a daily basis. So we're gonna initiate a process where they have to go and make site visits, which will get them more informed about what's going on and allow them to make better decisions about what they recommend. Customer database audit and analysis program. One of the things that we have identified as a group is the fact that we have a very large customer database. It tells us a lot of things about a lot of customers, breaks them out by the different segments, how much they use, what they use it for, whether they're water, whether they're sewer, whether they're both. We can do a lot of things to analyze data that will tell us a lot about our customers, to allow us to understand how we can better serve them, and also tell us how their future rate structure should be shaped to most effectively get what we need while meeting the needs of our customers. The next initiative was Galvanized Water Main Replacement Program. One of the things I think we'll all agree in here that think about it, the galvanized pipe that we have in our systems now, probably all of it is beyond its useful life. There's a lot of pipe out there, and it's a substantial cause for a significant portion of our boil water alerts, lines just simply failing. And there's a lot of that galvanized as part of that. So one of the initiatives we want to do is identify and eliminate galvanized line, provide better, we'll get better service, and actually a lot of these old galvanized have swollen almost closed. If you go and take one out of the line, a 2-inch pipe now has an opening like this. So our customers are getting very limited service. The pipe's worn out. It fails from time to time of and on its own just because it's worn out. So this is an initiative we think is pretty important just to the overall service of our customers. Pump station flow meter installation. This is important to us because we need to get real-time flow monitoring on our, particularly our critical lift stations, so that we understand what kind of capacities and capabilities we've got out in our system. As often as a developer comes up to us and talks to us about what's going on, we need to be able to tell them what we've got capabilities to do. The other benefit of having these meters out there, as Mr. Klein indicated, is the ability to plan for the future. If we know we're bumping up against capacity, max capacity in a basin, we know it's time to start doing more planning and start funneling money towards the improvements that would grow that capacity to an acceptable level for future growth, future economic development. So that's an important initiative for our overall business health here in the community. Value of Water Public Education Campaign. Basically, this is what the guys joke me about it, but I've said ever since I got here, I think in most communities, people look at water and wastewater service or sewer service as they take it for granted. I turned on the faucet, water came out. What we want to do is develop a program, implement an education campaign that will illustrate to our customers and to the citizens how important water and sewer is to their health at home and to our community as a whole. It's a life's blood of the community issue, as I like to say, and they like to gig me about it.
A little faster.
I'm good, but not that good. Fourth quarter initiatives, we want to look at St. Simon's Island Gravity Sewer Assessment Report. What this is this initiative is going to take the risk-based analysis of the assets of St. Simon's Island. This is going to be the first big report to come out of our formal asset management program. And basically what it does, it looks at the condition of those assets versus the consequence of those assets failing. The product of which is basically your risk factor. Of course, if you've got a high probability of failure and a high consequence of if it does fail, those are the assets that you want to be working on finding a solution for right now today. With this kind of a process, the guys will be able to look at all the assets on the island and set priorities for which need attention first and which need attention last. But it's the first major report that will help us set up at least an understanding of where limited resources need to be spent on St. Simon Island to correct problems we have or perceive to have. Warehouse job boxes. We talked about the weekly scheduling, and with that, it comes the opportunity. We've been working Ms. Crosby's been working real hard to consolidate our warehouse inventories, get control and understanding of it. With that, and with the weekly planning Burris has implemented, we hope to be able to plan our jobs enough ahead of time so that the folks down at the warehouse can take the work orders for the day or the next day, load the materials they'll need for any given job into a job box. So on the next morning when a crew shows up, they pick up their work orders, they pick up their job box or job boxes if they've got multiple jobs they need to do that day. They don't stop as a crew and start pulling materials and parts and that kind of thing. They gather the things up, they're on the road, they're going to be more effective and efficient. We're going to have better control of our inventory and probably less losses from inventory that we just don't account for. I think overall it's gonna be a big productivity boost for us. Updated sewer capacity maps. We talked about that earlier. If we've got a real-time capacity map, and that's the objective that we want to see occur, or initiative we want to see occur, we want to take those flows and the metered flows from our critical stations, from all of our stations. We want to have basically real-time information on what the capacity is in any sewer basin. As I understand it, we're going to take those and post them to the internet. That means if you're a developer, if you're an EDA person, or if you're any other member of the community that want to see what the situation is on sewer capacity in a given area, you'll be able to pull up our website, go to this map, and figure out what the situation is that day, at that time, to be able to plan for, oh yeah, there's room for me to do my project, or there's room for this project to be done in that location. The next one is workflow mapping program. We talked about the process mapping of our project reviews and developer project plan reviews. We need to be doing that for all of our processes. And you know, in a complex organization like this, there's umpteen jillion processes. So this is not an overnight initiative. This is gonna be a really long term. We're gonna prioritize the processes we have, identify them, prioritize them, and go out and map our workflows. We wanna understand what it is we do in all of our jobs to figure out where there's opportunities for improvement or needs for improvement, and map it out in such a way that we understand what those are and can take advantage of that. The large meter testing program. This is a program where I think I may have talked to a couple of you about it. Basically what we want to do, we're going to train up a couple of our distribution maintenance people on how to test our meters. Most utilities have meter testing crews that go out and analyze or check out the meters. We're going to focus on the larger meters. That's where the bigger opportunities and the bigger issues are. By looking at everything 2 inch and better and starting with the ones with the greatest flow, we're going to go through and test the meters to determine where we're not getting accurate meter reading. Oftentimes they'll show a discrepancy on the low side because most meters slow down. They don't speed up. They never speed up. They always slow down as they age. The benefit's going to be to our customers. We're going to be more equitable in our billing. Costs will be shared more appropriately. There will be some revenue recovery. So those are the kinds of things we look for from this program. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew just a minute. Now, for each of these initiatives, we went through and did a pretty detailed breakdown of the initiative. We defined what the initiative was going to be. We did a SWOT analysis, which I don't know if you're not familiar with SWOTs, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We analyzed those, and then we came back and said, what are the expected outcomes of the initiative, and then what are the KPIs we look to measure the effectiveness of the initiative. With that, we did that for each of these initiatives. But we're not going to go through all of them right now. What I'm going to ask Mr. Burrs to go through his weekly planning initiative and walk us through what through your mind as we work that out.
Right, so basically, we had a 6 or 7 person team. Very rarely were all 7 of us available at the same time to go through this process, and all of these initiatives have a staff champion. I mean, one person can't be the champion of 20 initiatives, so we all have 2 or 3 that we, those are, for lack of a better term, our babies. And one of mine is weekly maintenance planning. So, as Mr. Jenkins said, we went through and did a SWOT analysis on every one of these initiatives to see where we felt it was. So, the strengths to us of the weekly maintenance planning was there's software. CityWorks is what we use right now. It's an Azteca product that is already in place to facilitate advanced planning and scheduling. It's a system we've had for a long time. There's no reason to change that. With that system, we're starting to focus a whole lot more time on that now. Our staff is gaining knowledge in that software. Previously, there was some hesitance to use the software due to a lack of understanding, and we're getting better at using that. We've had it for a while now, but we're finally starting to tap into some of its capabilities. With the maintenance planning, we're going to improve our staff accountability because you're going to know where you need to be, when you need to be there, instead of us not exactly knowing in all situations what, you know, crew worker Joe is supposed to be doing. And through maintenance planning, you will be able to have a better hold on your preventive maintenance techniques and the schedules. And if you do better preventive maintenance, you should reduce your equipment downtime. But if you're doing the maintenance as prescribed by the manufacturer, it should last longer than if you don't do anything to it. So we've got that on the strengths. For weaknesses, this is a somewhat time-consuming process for staff to implement properly. I meet with each one of the divisions a different division every morning to do planning for the next week. So in my time, we're at about 10 hours a week doing this. Now, we will get faster at this the more we do it, but we're also currently walking and we want to be running eventually, so there's going to be more stuff brought into this as we go along. It will require behavioral changes of both the superintendents and the staff. As Mr. Junkin alluded to earlier, we have a very reactive culture here. It's come in, see what problems we got overnight and fix those. So getting out of that mindset to a mindset of we're going to be proactive and go fix things before they break is going to require some changes. It does, because you are going to be planning and scheduling this out with work order systems and stuff, it does increase your reliance on, and as a nature of that, the cost of the IT infrastructure as you go forward. Not majorly, but it is a potential there. Now, opportunities, this is where you really want to focus, in my opinion, on these initiatives. We have the opportunity to improve our productivity and efficiency in operations. Reduce, for lack of a better term, windshield time and time at the store picking up supplies. You know where you got to be, you know when you got to be there. You don't have time to be driving back and forth to different places, going out to a job and saying, this is what I need to do this, I'm going to run back to the warehouse and then go back to the job site to get that done. Being more efficient will reduce our cost, reduce our overtime cost, and reduce our maintenance cost. It allows for increased resource sharing among divisions. Let's say that you have a specialty piece of equipment, not that a backhoe is special, but let's talk about a backhoe just for that nature. And water distribution needs it one day, and facilities maintenance has to do it one day to dig up some stumps or something. Instead of having to purchase a second piece of equipment and you know that backhoe is not going to be used at distribution that day, facilities can use it the day they need it and not have to worry about getting every division every piece of equipment they want. We can provide proactive customer support. Most customers we have found are okay with being inconvenienced as long as you tell them they're going to be inconvenienced. They get really upset when they get inconvenienced and have no idea what's going on. So having a schedule of what you're going to do, Jay in his public information role can get out ahead of that and say, hey, we're going to be in your neighborhood next Wednesday. Just shouldn't be service interruptions, but just want to let you know you're going to see crews out in your neighborhood. That'll help out with that. And of course, this allows for more efficient tracking of resource use. That's equipment resources, our material resources, and our human resources. And then a threat. Anytime you're going to try to make a major organizational shift from a reactive to a preventive and planned culture, you've always got the threat that the employees don't want to buy into what you're going to do. Doesn't mean that they can't be persuaded to buy in, but it does mean it could make it a little more difficult in the initial. As you get more into this and use the software more, you could end up having a learning curve that takes a little longer than you anticipate for people to get all the skills they need to be able to do this, especially from the planning functions of going out there and identifying exactly what you need to do a job right the first time. And then you can't be too rigid with your scheduling practices because it can harm your customer service efforts. We're going to have to leave some crews that have some flexibility in their day, because what we don't want to get into is we receive a phone call and an employee tells a citizen that they can't help them today because they're not on the schedule, despite the fact that there's a manhole overflowing in their front yard. So you got to have some flexibility built in there. I will say that I have heard, not here, but I have heard that conversation before, that you're not on the schedule, you've got to wait. Well, that's not where we need to be at. So now, let me start out by saying these numbers are complete dummy numbers right now, so let's not focus too much on what these numbers say. But this is just an example of some KPIs we came up with for this and some of the information we could get out of this. And for maintenance planning, we have 4 KPIs. There's more than 4, but these are 4 we threw up here. Percentage of your maintenance work is planned or preventative. That number, the better you get at planning, should increase. So that's what we're talking about measuring. You should see growth in the areas you want to see them in. Percentage cost of your maintenance work that's planned or preventative, that one should increase because the more preventive work you do, the less your reactive costs are. And reactive work almost always costs more than doing it in advance. Percentage maintenance labor utilization, we need our maintenance people turning wrenches, not that they all turn wrenches, but wrench time is something we need to be focused on instead of windshield time. And the percentage of our work orders that are planned or preventive that are completed on schedule. It's great to have a schedule to say it's going to be done on Wednesday, but if you hadn't done it in 3 weeks, it really doesn't matter what's on schedule. So we want to keep track of how on schedule we are. And then this is just showing very few people, myself not included in this list, like to stare at tables of data all day long. So we can turn out graphical representations of data that is easy to interpret for people to say, here's how we're doing versus what we're looking for. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Junkin.
Thank you, Andrew. So we've been through the cycle. We've done the self-assessment. We've developed a strategic business plan. We've begun the process of implementing initiatives. So going forward, what we've got to do is start to measure our KPIs, analyze them, and keep the process in rotation. Make sure we never stop. It's a continuous issue, a continuous process. And again, it's not an overnight turn on the light switch. It's a long haul, it's a grind. We've got to stay with it, we've got to persevere. Next steps. So quarterly KPI updates. We want to, since we're going to be really kicking this into high gear come the first of the year, we want to set a routine schedule to meet with you all and provide progress reports, basically. Our progress reports will be built around the KPIs and what we see is going on. So we're thinking to start, the first one would be in early April, the first meeting in April. Look at what's happened, talk about how our progress is going. And in some cases, we may be a little bit ahead, a little bit behind on the initiatives, getting them where we want them to be for full implementation. But we're going to have that as a routine part of our quarterly discussions with the commission. We want to adjust as data dictates, so we may see changes as we go. Next, follow-up actions. The business plan that we developed is going to be the tool by which we provide our major considerations to you all for the budget for 2020. The budgeting process is starting right now. With this done, in the next week or two, we're going to be completing the budget considerations we're going to offer up to you all to drive what we want to try to achieve with the budgets we propose to you later on. So we're going to be moving in that direction. Tonight or in the morning, in the next 24 hours, I'll be emailing you guys a copy of our full strategic business plan. It's pretty meaty, it's pretty lengthy, but it's got great information. It fleshes out a lot of things that we've raced through to try to cover it in a short amount of time. It's a very healthy read. One of the other things I didn't put up here that I'm going to forward to you, yeah, I did. We're going to put the links to the Effective Utility Management Primer. That's the document that kind of steered what we were doing in the early going, and some other EUM reference, Effective Utility Management reference sites that talk about folks that have done it, implemented it, how it's helped them, that kind of thing. The other thing I was going to do is shoot an email with the actual digital version of our EUM primer. I know we handed it out in hard copy, but I'll send you a link so it's an easy access reference. We want to apply strategic business plan, as I said earlier, to our 2020 budget process. So we're off to the races, and look for a couple of emails tonight or in the morning. I hope you like where we're going. I think it's a good direction.
Can we weigh in, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, we've been here almost an hour listening to that, and I think we have to have a strategic plan, but I kind of latched on to what Andrew said, wrench time versus windshield time. I would caution that we don't let pursuing such an in-depth strategic plan take away from actually getting the job done of running the utility and executing operations day to day? Because this looks like a very involved plan, and it looks like something that's going to take a lot of time sitting at a computer keeping up with all these, with the SWOTs or whatever that thing you had there. You know, getting down into the weeds. So I think the more detailed it is, the more time it's going to take to chase those details and account for them, you know, and measure, take measurements, quantify performance. You know, this is just something else. I see this as, I'm not saying it's bad, but I just see this as something else that's taking time for staff to be doing. You know, you can have wrench time, you can be facing a wrench, you can be facing a windshield, and you can be facing a screen. I think I like the wrench time. So if it looks like it's taken a lot of time to execute this thing, we may be going down the wrong path. You know, it needs to be simple is better.
And certainly, as we, I appreciate
In my
the
view.
comments. Yeah, I understand,
Yeah.
and there is a lot of, it's a very valid comment.
Yeah.
We hope to, as we go through, evaluate these KPIs. I mean, the folks that are gonna be managing it are gonna be the senior managers and the superintendents. So we're gonna be at a high level, implementing policies and changes. What we're gonna have to do is, in the first, as we jump out on these things, start to automate the way we collect the data. We're working with our folks, our finance director is working with a software called OpenGov, which basically will track down a lot of these variables and parameters that we need to be looking at. And hopefully we're gonna have dashboard reports that bring this information to us pretty readily so that we can quickly evaluate. It's not like this group here is gonna be sitting there every day. Well, Joe, how many hours did you spend on this job yesterday? Fred, what did you do? No, it's not gonna be like that. We're gonna automate this and streamline the processes so managers can manage, and the data is gonna be collected in an automated way. You know, certainly if we've got too many, we'll recognize the ones that are not doing us any good and drop some stuff. We may be a little bit overboard right now, but we'll figure that out. I hope.
Other comments?
I thought it was well done. I liked a lot of that. Just a question, just probe, not necessarily for that, but it made me think about it. We were talking about basins earlier, and this is just more, I guess, from a conceptual standpoint. If we're looking at a basin that is nearing capacity, but we're also not much little growth left in it, do we have any subjective way for y'all as a team to look at it and say, well, there's no point in upgrading that because even fully built out, we're only gonna be at 102%?
We've actually done some of that.
We actually have, and Todd was able to secure this information from the county. The county has a list of vacant lots in each basin. So that is being taken into account. If there's 2 vacant lots in a basin, there's not, why try to improve that necessarily, because those 2 lots aren't gonna have a big deal.
Like 2003.
Yeah, I mean, so you're looking at some of that where some of these basins are completely built out. So we do have that data and it is being incorporated.
So, I mean, we would allow in some cases to go to 105% of design capacity or something, if we were never gonna get above that.
There's the potential to do that, yes, sir.
And the rule of thumb, I may not have mentioned this, basically what the regulatory folks like is when you start to get to 80% of an asset's capacity, you can perceive that there's still growth out there, as you were implying, Commissioner Stevens, you need to be starting the plan process of what you're gonna do to grow for that need. And we're gonna apply that to our lines and sub-basins.
Other commissioners? To follow up and put in with what I said in the earlier remarks, this organization couldn't do this kind of thought or planning when I first came on board. We didn't really know what our capacity was anywhere. And that really kind of goes for water too. We used to run out. If somebody wanted to build a new development, somebody go out and see if the wet well or see what the downtime, run time was on the well before we'd be able to know whether somebody could, build a new development out there. That's changed and it's changing. It's this kind of process, in my opinion, while I agree with you on the wrench time, it's kind of like telling your child, I don't have one now, but when I did, to pick up the toys in his room, and he has no idea which toy to pick up first and what to do with it. And this way the organization and at each level should know what they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to do it, and how it's supposed to be done. And I look forward to seeing how this gets implemented and seeing how much success that it could have. So, we'll move on to the next subject, which is the Roundup program.
This is just a brief update regarding the payment assistance program. If you recall, in the 2016 legislation, there was provision that gave the JWSC the power to solicit and accept donations for to assist in bill paying for low-income residential customers and to provide bill paying assistance to residential customers in time of financial hardship. The legislation required us to bid to bid out the services for a entity that would administer that program. That was bid out, and who was the winning bid? I can't remember the name of the company. Okay. We have drafted a contract that will govern that payment assistance program. We've sent it to their council. They're reviewing it, and we should have something for you the next meeting in 3 weeks.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, why do we call it Roundup program? Why is it called a Roundup? It's not really, to me, it don't seem to be rounding up anything.
It's a payment assistance program, but part of I believe the reason why it's called the Roundup program is because that's going to be one of the places that it can be funded.
It's basically the intent of the program was give the customers an opportunity. If their bill is $32.40, you want to round it up, check the box, and we'll start rounding up whatever the odd amount is up to the next dollar. We'll round it up to that next dollar, and we'll take that extra that wasn't part of their payment for services and put it in a roundup fund to help with customer assistance.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, so it should, if using 50 cents as the median thing that rounds up every month from every customer, and if we have 30,000 customers, which we don't have that many, and everybody rounded up, that'd be about $180,000, quick calculation, a year that we could have to help people who are less advantaged than you and I to pay their bills. And that's kind of where this is going.
Okay.
What's the general program administration cost? Just around numbers? Oh, it's percentage.
Percentage of total that is dispersed.
Hazardous duty pay, it's next on the list, and that's you. Are we gonna jump?
Sir, I've got 22 quick slides.
22. I mean, I know what hazardous duty pay is. That's what they paid me for jumping out of airplanes in J2.
You know, the other day, it just something occurred to me. We all got an email today about a bad sewage main break and a water line break at the south end of the island. That was right around the corner from the house, so I jumped on the golf cart and just rode around there, just wanted to kind of see what was going on. When I got around there, I saw that the water had washed out from under the foundation of a structure, and it had washed a trench out into a detention pond, I'm sorry. And in that, there was, raw waste, of course, And the team members that were there were physically down in it, you know, chest deep, working to repair the sewage line. They'd already got the water line repaired by the time I got there. And, you know, it just occurred to me that is way above and beyond. So I just wanted to bring this up, and again, I'm not proposing anything today or anything, but just wanted to, you know, bring it up food for thought. I wish that we could explore a way at least, and I'm not talking about a once a month thing or once a week thing, or maybe even a twice a month, you know, every other month thing, but you know, these doozy things that happen once or twice a year, where it's just an extremely dangerous situation, the staff is going way above and beyond for the administrator, or the executive director, or the deputy executive director to authorize some kind of extra for the team members that were involved in that. You know, just being there, looking at it today, I just, you know, I just thought we ought to have some kind of program for these special occasions when there's just really an extreme call of duty to you know, respond to these events. So just, you know, again, food for thought. But, you know, I spoke to Andrew briefly that night, and, you know, asked him to put it on the agenda as a talking point for myself. But, again, you know, by no means I want this to turn into a, you know, once a month, you know, we're incentivizing people, or, you know, once a week or something like that. But I mean, there's, you know, I was talking to Andrew that night and said, how often does something like this to this level happen? And I believe the answer was a couple times a year. There's something major like this where people are, you know, working kind of in situations that are extremely dangerous and very nasty.
Do we know of any other wastewater utility that does something like that?
I personally don't know of any wastewater utility that does anything like this, you know, but to Commissioner Stevens' point out there the other night, we fixed that line, that was a private line because there was an absolute emergency for that building not to collapse, with the water main that was causing there. The fact that-
3-story building.
Yeah, 3-story building. The fact that the stucco held on, pretty remarkable in my opinion. But we got out there and did that, and kudos to the staff. I won't even try to say that I was down in the hole with them doing that work. They got down in there and got at it real quick and had that job fixed very quickly for what was going on. So it's not something that other utilities necessarily do that I'm aware of, but I know it's something that would definitely be appreciated by the staff members when they do have to do things.
Do we
like
have a cash awards program at all?
that. We do not.
And, you know, and something made me think about this, you know, I've worked in the private industry before, and, you know, worked for a small company since, you know, was on a salary, and, you know, was, you know, hourly employee actually. And, you know, just every now and again when something just above and beyond went off, you know, the CEO kind of say, you know, Trevor, just a little extra for you, I mean, for what y'all done in this situation. When I worked for an electrical contractor, and it was, you know, really bad situation or something, you know, again, just food for thought. I'm not talking about a big chunk of money here, but
Yeah, no, I think,
it was.
I know your heart's in the right place. We just need to work out some
Yeah, I'm not
details
saying
to
let's
do
do
it.
it today, just food for thought.
No, that's good, thank you. If you, Mr. Chunkin, look at
Yes.
potential areas that you could look at that.
Follow up,
Okay.
maybe have some thoughts and recommendations. we'll
Okay.
share and maybe
Well,
come back to the full commission.
The last thing we have on the agenda for discussion is the financials.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Starting with the balance sheet for October, just a few comments on the balance sheet. First, you'll see that our cash and cash equivalents is just over $1 million over the balance of June 30th. The primary reason for that is that revenues are running approximately $1.1 million ahead of budget, and expenditures are running somewhat behind budget for the year. So there's a cash accumulation from
Will you
that.
speak up, John, I'm sorry.
Or is this not on? Is that working?
Let me say something.
The primary reasons for the increase in that cash balance is that revenues are running ahead of budget. Expenditures are running behind budget for the year to date. That's one factor in that. Another factor is that just down below that, you'll see that the allowance for bad debts went from 1.978 at June 30th down to 1.689. So there's a decrease in that. which would, two things in that. The allowance is computed based on the total cash balances in the various age categories of receivables. So it would indicate that receivables are being collected, which would increase our cash accounts. The other side of that is that that balance would also decrease when we write off bad debts. And when we get to the summary revenue statement, you'll see that we're running almost twice, or a little over twice, the year-to-date budget in bad debt write-offs. What we're doing is going through the accounts receivable and looking at those accounts that have balances still outstanding but have had no activity in the last 90 days. Those people are probably gone, and those accounts probably should be turned over to collections. So that's another reason for that balance going down.
On the revenues, they're substantially higher than were budgeted. Were the budgeted numbers based on the new rate schedule?
New rate schedule and increased usage. There's a combination of the two.
And like the administrative fees are substantial, that's $600,000 over.
Again, Commissioner, the budget amounts were based on the rate schedule as it existed in June before the
Okay, so it's not based on a new, new rate structure.
Where administrative charges were clearly defined as being just certain divisions, debt charges being just debt, and the operation charges covering O&M and reserve deposits. With the change in the rate structure, there is some usage included in a base charge now, 1,000 gallons of water and sewer, and that's being coded to an administrative fee because the accounting structure and the rate structure didn't exactly line up. So, but when you add those first four lines together, which are the water use, sewer use, admin fees, and debt fees, those totals were about $1 million over year to date, which is just under 11%.
But it looks like we're going to exceed our budget substantially on revenues for this year.
Sir. Right now it does.
And the budget was based on a 3% increase, right?
Yes, sir.
So we actually had, okay.
That was a composite 3% based on total, which also factored in average usage per person and total usage per year.
Why is other income up?
Pardon me?
The category says other income.
Other income is such things as service fees. There's a fee for opening an account. There are cutoff fees for collection efforts. Late fees are included in that, the 1.5% per month on each bill. Such things as the operational tap fees, the cost of a customer pays to have a meter put in. There are about 20 different some of the backup documents that were emailed to you earlier go through line by line of what's included in that other revenue.
On the expenses, why you got some expenses under purchase orders? Personnel expenses, operating expenses, capital costs. Explain that to me.
Say that again, Commissioner.
Under the under the expenses, you've got
yes, sir.
3 items there under purchase orders. Explain that to me, please.
Those are orders that have been placed with vendors for goods to be delivered in the future that have not been received as yet. For instance, chemicals, we may issue a purchase order for 3 months worth of chemicals and only take delivery on what's needed at the time over the next 3 months. So that it's a commitment that we've issued to a vendor that we intend to buy this over the next period of time, but we may buy the full amount, we may buy a little more, may buy a little less, but that gives the vendor authorization to supply those goods or services to us.
I'm going to say this, This allows our folks to account for monies they've committed, even if they haven't spent, so we don't overspend.
Okay.
And again, some of those are discrete items that would be received in the next week or two. Some of them may not be received, and maybe a blanket type purchase order that's issued for goods for 3 months at a time.
So you're projecting us to have a $6 million additional more than budget at the end of the year?
Surplus.
Right.
You mean surplus, yeah.
Oh, I'm
Looks
sorry,
like
what'd
it,
I say?
doesn't it?
It potentially could be. If everything continued along in a linear fashion as it has for the next 8 months, as it has in the first 4 months, that would hold true, yes.
So where we pay off, or where we're getting more revenue from debt than we had budgeted for debt charges than we had budgeted for, does that money have to be allocated to go ahead and pay off debt right then, or can it be?
No, sir, that's, all the money that's collected goes into to a revenue collection account, and then as expenses are incurred, it's transferred over to the general checking or over to the payroll account, or in the case of collection of capital improvement fees, it's transferred to that reserve. So there is no hard and fast rule that this amount of money is collected for this goes to that for that purpose and only that purpose.
So we're forecasting then operating expenses to be 8.5 million at year end, where we budgeted 11 million?
No,
That
no.
8.5 million that you see there is the actual year-to-date.
Oh, that's year to date.
Yes.
Add the POs
That-
to the year-to-date actual column, add those.
You know, we've actually had an outflow of cash of $6.85 million. We have $1.8 million of goods on order that we have not received or paid for as yet. So year-to-date, we've encumbered $6.89 million of operating funds.
So is the year-end estimate the prorated version of the
That should
actual
be-
year?
That should be prorated, yeah.
Well, I mean, is it the prorated version of the
It's-
actual,
It's-
actual-
That's
Actual,
actually,
not
it's
including
actual.
purchase orders.
not
Not
including the
included.
purchase orders? Okay, that's what I was asking.
So we need to add the purchase orders to that estimated year end to know the,
Well, it depends on which way you want to do it. You could do it that way, or you could, I would suggest doing this, you could multiply the purchase order amount by the same fashion to get that number. Because
Well-
if you're purchasing linearly, then your purchase orders theoretically should be mostly linear too. So, basically, if you just add the 1.8 to that, it's gonna say that's gonna be a very high number, but we're going to have more purchase orders as the year goes on as well.
Yes, because as these purchase orders are liquidated, more will be issued after that.
Right, that's what I was trying to make sure, I just understood how y'all do it.
Did I hear you right that the $1,498,000 we got for debt charges that was on the bill as debt charges is not going toward paying off our debt?
Oh, no, it all goes into, all of those 4 charges go into one bucket. They're not separately accounted for as receipts for $1.48 million received for debt payments that is not specifically identified to only pay debt.
Why is it listed as debt on the people's bills then?
That's,
It's misleading to them, it seems like to me.
No, the money
No.
that's collected is used to pay debt. The
It is.
question that Commissioner Stephen asked is, if we collect more because we get new customers, does that extra money on top of what was budgeted have to go to pay off debt?
but those are defined.
But if their bill shows debt, that money ought to go toward debt, it seems like.
And it should, and that's why it's identified as debt on the bill. is
And
we
so
take-
every
what
penny
our-
we get that marked on debt from a bill should
Yeah.
go toward debt.
And that's what the rate schedules are designed to do, is to
Right.
take our total amount of debt for the year, divide that by the total number of RUs we expect to bill for the year, and then that's listed as debt charge on the bills, and this is the amount that we have collected from that.
But
And that's used-
so every bit of it does go toward paying down debt that we collect.
No, we
Yes.
only
Should,
have-
if it doesn't.
We have
Yes,
a principal and interest payments each year. So a portion of it goes to that as the customer changes that. In my opinion, the ideal solution is where there is no debt on the bill at all.
Well, I understand that, but if debt's on the bill, it ought to go toward the
What
principal
I'm
and
saying
interest
is,
I think it's
payments.
called now
it does go,
RVU charge.
that does go to pay debt, but it's not, what I'm saying is it's not a specific account. We don't take the bills and say we've collected $1.4 million in debt, and that goes into an account that only pays debt. All of the money goes into our cash collection account and then pays expenses as they're incurred. And there is a monthly transfer to the bond trustee for the next 1/6 of the next interest payment and 1/12 of the next principal payment. So that money is effectively going to pay debt.
I didn't,
As long as it's going toward that, but is it listed on the bill as debt or REU charge?
REU fee, or REU charge.
so back to and that's what I was trying to ask him a minute ago. I didn't do a good job asking the question, but if we were anticipating getting $1,174,000 in fees for up till now of debt, and we got $1,498,000, then obviously we're, a good bit over. Are we gonna take that overages and apply toward driving our debt down?
No, sir.
We're not going to.
No, sir, because some of that, we may have collected more than necessary to pay the debt, but we may not have collected enough to pay operation and maintenance expenses. So even though those charges are broken down to follow the way the rates that are charged to customers are presented on the bills. They don't necessarily mean that that's a totally restricted pot of money that's coming into the joint water sewer.
Does any customer
It's all
question what the
considered user
REU
rate.
charge is for?
Pardon me?
Does any customer question what the REU charge is for?
They do from time to time.
And what do we tell them?
Just as described, and it's actually listed on the back of the bill, that's each customer's portion of the bond debt recovery expense. So if it's, and I'll confirm that, I do believe it's listed as residential equivalent unit charge. We removed the word debt off of the bill because customers were confused thinking that they were paying off somebody else's bill. So it's not going towards bad debt, it's going towards bond debt.
So every residential user has the same REU charge on each bill? Every residential
Yes, sir.
user?
And it's proportionate. So if you have a 4-unit apartment complex or duplex, then it's four times that. So we don't presently list the number of REUs on the bill, though that's something what we're working on. So commercial, all the non-residentials, of course, have a proportionate number that's higher, and then it's just a higher REU fee on that bill. And it's broken down by water and sewer.
But you know what, it just seems uncommon that we get extra money that we won't use that to pay that debt down, to pay it down, that we use it for something else. Because everybody's thinking, once we collect that, let's say we collect $500,000 more, so we're just gonna keep that and use it for something else? But we collected to pay that debt down. I'm just saying, I mean, it's just common sense. If you want to get rid of your debt, or get rid of your bond debt, and that's what it's for. That's what it's being used for. If it's debt for any debt that we have in the system, then I can see it being used for whatever it needs to be used for. But if you specifically state it is to pay down that bond debt, then it should be used for that.
If nothing else, it ought to be put in the debt reserve fund or something. And then
I'll put in a fund that the next time it's
we could
needed.
use it for that.
What could be done on a periodic basis is determine how much has been charged for debt service, or the REU fee on the bills, say quarterly or semi-annually or even annually, and then that amount of money could be transferred to the bond trustee and held in the sinking fund for future bond payments.
The reason why I say that is because the city and the county get beat up all the time by having this debt that was transferred to JWSC. And if it's not being eliminated, then we still gonna get beat up. Well, you got all this big debt because it was not JWSC debt. It is the debt that the city and county gave to the JWSC, and they got to make sure they take care of that. Well, if we don't have the means to take care, or if we are not aggressively using the money that we said we're gonna use to take care of that debt, then we can always be the bad guys.
If the commission wished, we could take that, what has been charged, and transfer any excess to the bond trustee at the end of the year.
I guess you keep collecting after you pay it off.
We can have this discussion again as we execute and determine what we want to do at the end of the year. Generally, the funds that are in excess of what we require to meet all our debt payments goes into the R&R, and we never have enough money in R&R to do all the things we need to do.
That's fine. Let's say that. No.
Huh?
Well, we can say that then. If we're gonna do that way, that's fine.
Mr. Chairman, would you like us to provide a proposal and a memo for action on the next commission meeting? in this
No.
regard? Okay.
I think you need to look at the wording. I think we've had this discussion before, you and I.
Yep.
We just need to, debt does not need to be on the bill in that term. We ought to just collect the money that we need for services and apply it as required.
And most times that debt payments are not specifically identified on
Well,
the
we're gonna
bill.
assume more debt here
And
in the near future.
Yes, we are.
in those four charges for water use, sewer use, admin, and debt, those four combined are typically considered user fees, which, and then in turn, the bond resolution says in what order expenses are to be paid from that.
Yeah, I think we need to look at all this hard when we do our budget, annual budget.
Well, I think that's the time to have the discussion.
Back on operating expenses, if you could help me understand that line, please. I see the 2019 budget, 11,029,000, year-to-date budget, the year-to-date actual, we add the year-to-date actual and the purchase orders, and we get the total.
Yes, sir.
Help me understand the estimated year-end number,
That's the.
8,469,000.
That's the year-to-date actual column divided by 4 to prorate by month times 12 to project out for the fiscal year.
I see. So the purchase orders are completely left out of that one then?
Yes.
So you would divide, in order to have apples to apples, so that estimated year end compares with the 11 million in the budget. I mean, how do we arrive at a number so we know?
Essentially what you're doing is this is a future expense. It's not a real expense. It's sitting out there. It could come as an expense if you don't ever go and get something off your blanket purchase order, or you might issue another blanket purchase order. The true measure of what your expenses are is what it has under the actual year-to-date, which is, where's that number?
2,823,000.
Right.
There must be a way to
Well, that,
raise that estimated total, for me to look at it, so I can see that the estimated total year-end matches in some way the 2019 budget number of 11 million.
No, he already said we're under budget.
yes, and there are any number of ways of projecting that projected year end. We could we could base it just on actual as these numbers are. That could be based on some factor of the encumbrances that are coming out. So we could wind up with 3, 4, 5 different projections to year end. And some of these expenditures and some of these revenues are seasonal, and that's not factored into this as well. So we could we could essentially have a number of projections to year end. We need to determine how that, the commission wants to see that.
Well, the proper way, in my opinion, is that you take the actual expenses, because with the encumbrances out there, those are expenses to be.
Yes.
And you don't know what that's gonna be. But when you actually go to the vendor, get an item, he gives it to you, then he bills us, that becomes an expense and is reflected in the expenses column.
Yes, sir.
So if you include the encumbrances, you misstate your expenses from that, okay? You need to track your encumbrances so that you know how much you've got sitting out there in potential expenses. At year end, the last 30 days, people have to clear their encumbrances. They either have to finish ordering, which they can order ahead, but that's not really a good practice, or they can decrease the amount of the encumbrance if they're not gonna do any more ordering.
Well, the encumbrances are really a tool for the managers to use to make sure that they do not exceed their annual budget in a line item. By taking this is what I've expended so far this year in this line item, I've already got orders outstanding for this amount, so what's left over from that is what they have left to spend. And without taking into account those encumbrances, they could very easily go over budget.
The managers have to know what they have sitting out.
So you're saying that we don't know what the outcome's gonna be, that potentially the difference in the 2019 budget of $11,029,000 and the estimated year end of $8,469,000 could be $2.5 million worth of encumbrances that we have in place at year end.
It
That,
could be.
but we don't know.
No, we don't. It's speculation.
We need to go to an
Unless,
executive session.
other than going through a specific line item by specific line item through 300 or 400 line items and saying, well, that's all I'm gonna spend on this year, so that's the year-end amount on that. Or this amount won't be expended until 8 months into the year.
That's all the cleanup that has to be done in June and July that actually extends into August.
Well, actually, most of that would take place in late April and May, so,
Yeah.
so before we get to year end.
Okay, we need to go to an executive session.
Very, very quickly, on the last page, overtime's up about 60%.
Yeah, that's kind of bad.
Why are we so high on overtime?
I had that as one of mine.
Two issues on overtime. One of them was, scheduling at the wastewater plant. We budgeted, or the overtime was budgeted on a new schedule that didn't get implemented before the budget year, and it was built in overtime, at the beginning of the budget year. So on a monthly basis, theirs has decreased drastically. And then the admin services, a lot of that has been because of issues with the billing system having to, manually do the cutoff list. So that has decreased as well.
And a couple
Has
other.
decreased.
The rate at which it's going, the total's not gonna decrease, but it won't grow to near the extent it's growing now because we got the.
Grows as fast as it's
working
growing.
correctly.
The admin part, we have terminated any overtime in that area, and the collection module in Harris is working now.
And a couple of other things in the overtime in particular is that the inventory staff was transferred from systems pumping and maintenance to the purchasing division, and that was done after the budget was prepared, so there needs to be a budget adjustment for that between divisions. And in the planning and construction division, Todd had budgeted money for temporary services to complete a project that he found was better completed by staff because it got done quicker and more accurately by staff using overtime than it would by a temporary service. So there's going to need to be a budget adjustment for that as well.
And we have people in finance who are not exempt employees.
Yeah, Jay, your staff, how many people are not exempt? how many people exempt other than you?
I believe I'm the
Okay.
only one.
Laura.
Just you?
Oh, she's not, she's in finance now.
Good, that's true.
I'm the only one.
So we budgeted $24,000 a year, and now we got 27.
Yes, sir, going into the budgeting process, we didn't have any expectation that we would have the, 3 staff that committed time on, let's say in particular Sunday, to confirm that the cutoff list that would be going out on Monday was accurate. And it really took a matter of about 6 to 8 months to ensure that, confirming it by hand, that we didn't disconnect somebody that didn't need to be. Of course, that was offset by the actual fees, but I would much rather, if we're gonna be able to use that fee to our advantage operationally, that we not be spending that on overtime. So that'll be straightened out, really starting next Monday.
So we should see it go down, like you said, like,
Like a lead balloon, yes, sir.
all right, okay, we'll look for it.
Indeed.
I make a motion, we move into executive session.
I second.
For
Property. Okay, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. We are in an executive session. We need to go into it now.
So Ronnie could leave.
We already know about that one.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to come out of executive session.
Second.
All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carried. Do you have a motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept staff and the attorney's recommendation on land and authorize chairman to sign any paperwork as necessary.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, motion's carried. Is there any other business to be conducted? Hearing none, seeing none, meeting is adjourned.